Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Before you drift off, I thought it would be a nice idea if you can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I was on a long drive north, not really on a schedule. I'd been sleeping in my van most nights to save money. It was a decent setup, blackout curtains, foam mattress, a little cooler, and a battery-powered fan. I didn't always pick the safest spots, but I stuck to quiet residential areas where I wouldn't draw attention. Just one night here, one night there, then move on. That night was no different. It was a small neighborhood just outside a town I can't even remember the name of now. Neat houses, trimmed hedges, a few cars and driveways. No barking dogs, no motion lights, no parking signs. The kind of place where nobody would think twice about a nondescript van parked along the curb. I backed into a spot under a tree, killed the engine, and cracked the front windows just enough to let air in. It was just past 11 p.m. I had a quick snack, scrolled through my phone until the screen started burning my eyes, then crawled into the back and closed the curtains. I remember hearing a train in the distance before I dozed off. The kind of sound that feels far away and safe. It couldn't have been more than a few hours later when something pulled me out of sleep. Not a noise at first, just that weird shift in the air when something's wrong. I blinked into the dark and listened. Everything was still. No voices, no cars, just the distant hum of a street lamp outside. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps. Real slow, real deliberate. They crunched lightly on the gravel shoulder, circled around the van. They didn't stop. Just kept going, slow and steady, like someone walking laps. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, trying to tell myself it was just someone out for a smoke or walking a dog. But no dog made a sound. And no one walks in circles around a parked van at 2 a.m. The footsteps paused right outside the sliding door on the passenger side. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then, click, click. A lighter. Flicked once, didn't catch. Again. This time it sparked, and for a split second I saw light through the tiny gap in the curtain near the floor. Just a flash, enough to see the outline of someone crouching. Then came the smell. Gasoline. At first I thought I was imagining it, but it got stronger, thicker, unmistakable. That sweet, chemical bite that sticks in your nose. Someone was pouring it. Outside. Right by the van. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just lay there frozen, ears straining, trying to hear past the blood rushing in my head. The footsteps started again, slower now. Crunch, crunch, circling back toward the front driver's side. I reached, barely, toward where my phone was plugged in near my pillow, doing everything I could to keep from shifting the van. My hand found it. I turned the screen on with the side button, brightness still low. No signal. Not even one bar. I don't know how long I lay there holding that useless phone, just listening. Then I heard something that made my skin go cold. A soft tap on the driver's side window. Not a knock. A tap. Fingertip against glass. 1, 2, then nothing. That did it. I started planning how to get out. The van's back doors opened into the street away from the sidewalk. But they were loud. I'd have to unlock them, swing them wide, and sprint barefoot. I had no idea where I even was. I didn't know if I'd run into someone's yard or straight into traffic. Still, it was better than burning alive. But then, nothing happened. For maybe 15 minutes, maybe more, there was total silence. Not even footsteps. Just stillness. That awful, tense kind where every second stretches out like an hour. I stayed flat, staring up at the ceiling, still smelling gas, still hearing the click of the lighter replay in my head. Then, off in the distance, a car drove by. Slow. Its headlights swept across the inside of the van, just a faint glow through the curtains, then faded. It was the only normal thing that had happened in what felt like forever. I almost cried when I saw the light. I waited a few more minutes, then inched toward the front, barely lifting the curtain near the floor on the passenger side. Empty. No one on the sidewalk, no one crouched by the wheels. The street was clear. Still dark, but I could make out the shape of the bushes and the base of a fire hydrant a few feet up. I moved to the front seat and turned the key just enough to unlock the wheel and power the dash. No headlights. I didn't want to light the place up and show I was awake. I just needed to move. The fan started on the first try, but I didn't punch it. I eased out as quietly as I could, turned the corner, and drove a few blocks without even putting on the cabin lights. I didn't turn on my phone screen again until I was in the parking lot of a 24-hour gas station. That's when I saw it. On the driver's side mirror, a dark smear. I got out to check, and yeah, it was wet. The edge of the mirror and the seal of the window smelled like gas. Whoever it was had poured it right up to the glass. I checked the ground. Nothing leaked from the van itself. The smell was on me now, stuck to my skin. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Just sat in the van under the bright station lights, engine running, doors locked, staring out at nothing. In the morning, I went to a car wash and scrubbed everything down. Even cleaned the tires and wheel wells, just in case. I didn't call the cops. What would I say? I had no plates, no face, no names. Just footsteps and a smell on a lighter that didn't quite catch. I don't park on quiet streets anymore. I pay for campgrounds, truck stops, anywhere with people around. Even if it costs more. Even if it's noisy. Because quiet doesn't mean safe. I was heading west and didn't feel like paying for a campground. I'd already done 3 nights of sleeping in the van on back roads and rest stops, so I figured one more wouldn't make a difference. The map showed a small town ahead, mostly boarded up businesses, looked half dead. Perfect. I got there around dusk and drove around a bit until I found this old 2-story brick building on the edge of town. No signs, windows smashed, door boarded shut. Weeds everywhere. There was a patch of cracked asphalt out back, big enough to park without being seen from the road. The lot was half surrounded by a chain-link fence, but one side was missing completely. It felt tucked away. I pulled in slow, lights off, and parked close to the wall. Killed the engine and just sat for a minute, listening. No sounds except the bugs and a few birds settling in. I'd camped in weirder spots. I made a sandwich, cracked a warm soda, and watched the sky get dark through the front windshield. No one walked by. No headlights. Just quiet. I crawled in the back, closed the curtains, and lay on my side facing the wall. I left a window cracked just an inch or two. It was warm and stuffy, but the breeze helped a little. Sometime later, I don't know how long, I woke up. Not to a noise, not really. It was just a weird sense that something was different. My fan was still running. Crickets were still going. But I was wide awake all of a sudden. I stayed still and listened. Nothing. Then I heard it. A scrape. Slow. Like something metal dragged along the van's side. Not a bang. Not a knock. Just a scrape. Starting near the back, moving forward toward the front. Then it stopped. I held my breath. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Nothing. Then the sound came again, the same scrape, but shorter this time. Like someone testing the surface, or tracing something. It stopped right near where my head was, behind the curtain. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just stared into the dark, listening so hard my ears hurt. The curtain near my head moved slightly, just from the breeze, but in that moment it felt like it was reacting to something on the other side. Whoever it was didn't tap or speak. They didn't try to open the door. Just that quiet dragging sound along the paint, like a key or a nail. Then, footsteps. Real faint. Gravel crunching. Moving around the back. I thought about turning on my phone to call someone, but I knew the screen would light up the whole van. And I didn't want whoever was out there to know I was awake. More time passed. A lot, maybe an hour. My knees started to ache from staying still. At some point I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes again, it was starting to get light out. I didn't move right away. I waited until I could hear birds again, real morning birds, not the late night kind. Then I slowly sat up, peeled the curtain back a couple inches, and looked around. Nothing. The lot was empty. No one walking. No fresh tire tracks. Just weeds and trash and the same broken fence. I climbed into the front seat, heart still pounding, and turned the key halfway to check the dash. The fuel light came on, but everything else looked fine. I waited a minute, then stepped outside. That's when I saw it. On the driver's side, scratched into the paint just above the rear wheel well, were the words, "I know you're alone." The letters weren't huge. Maybe 10 inches across, done with something sharp. Deep enough to catch the light, not deep enough to dent. The last word curved slightly, like whoever did it was crouched or hunched weird while writing. My stomach dropped. I scanned the empty lot again, turned in a full circle. Nothing. Not a soul. I climbed back in, locked the doors, and started the van. I didn't even check my mirrors. I just backed out onto the side street and took the first road heading out of town. I drove for 2 hours before I stopped at a gas station. Filled up, bought coffee, and went straight to the side of the van to check again. The scratch was still there, catching the sunlight. My fingerprints were all over the dust, but I could see where a palm had pressed flat just below the words. Not mine. Too wide. No smudges like someone leaned in to steady themselves, just one print, dead center. I washed the van that day, but the scratches didn't buff out. I had to repaint that panel a month later. I never figured out who it was, or how long they stood there, or if they ever left. I'd been living out of my van for about 5 months when this happened. Nothing fancy, just an old Dodge I'd built out with some plywood, foam, and blackout curtains. I wasn't doing the whole social media van life thing. I just couldn't afford rent anymore. I mostly stayed in Walmart lots, national forest roads, quiet neighborhoods when I had to. That night, I'd driven deep into a forest in Oregon. BLM land, free to camp on, no cell service. My favorite kind of spot. The clearing was maybe the size of a basketball court. Just dirt and pine needles, tucked a little ways off the main gravel road. Not a single car passed me the entire drive-in. I parked with the rear of the van facing the tree line, just in case someone drove in. I didn't want my brake lights facing the road. Just instinct. I had dinner around sunset, read a bit, then turned off all the lights around 10. It was cold enough for a sleeping bag, but not freezing. the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I had one small battery-powered camera mounted on the inside of the rear window, not super high-end, just a motion-activated dash cam pointed behind me. I also had a trail cam zip-tied to a tree about 20 feet from the van, facing back toward the driver's side. I didn't really expect anything to happen, I just liked having them running overnight. Made me feel safer. I fell asleep fast. I remember dreaming about something boring, like walking through a grocery store. Then, out of nowhere, I woke up. Fully awake. Like someone hit a switch in my brain. The van was dead silent. No wind, no animals, not even the usual creaks from the frame cooling down. I checked my phone out of habit, no bars. It was just after 3:10 a.m. Then I heard it. Click. Not loud. Not right next to me. But unmistakable. A camera shutter. I lay there completely still. Then again, click. A few seconds apart. Like someone was taking photos at a slow pace, trying not to rush. Click. This one sounded closer. I sat up slowly, not touching the curtains. Just listening. I held my breath to keep my heartbeat out of my ears. It was the kind of sound that doesn't echo or tarry. Just that flat, quiet snick of a shutter, followed by silence. Click. I couldn't tell which side it was coming from. It felt like it moved around, first behind me, then off to the passenger side, then near the front. My cameras were still on. I saw the little red light on the rear one blinking, motion activated. I figured I'd just check the footage in the morning. Right now, I didn't want to let whoever was out there know I was awake. No footsteps. No voices. Just that sound. Every 10 or 15 seconds. Then it stopped. I stayed sitting for maybe an hour. No more clicks. Just that oppressive silence again. I finally lay back down, still fully dressed, and waited for the sky to start turning gray. At dawn, I got up and opened the back doors real slow. There were no footprints, no trash, no signs anyone had been there. The dirt was packed and dry, so maybe it wouldn't have shown tracks anyway. I walked over to the trail cam and popped the SD card. Then I climbed in the van and checked the dash cam footage from the night. Nothing. I rewound to 3:10. Nothing but the van sitting there in the dark. No flashes, no figures, no shutter sound. The audio had nothing either, just wind, which didn't even match what I remembered. I know it was completely still. I plugged the trail cam card into my laptop. Same thing. It had recorded me walking around the van at dusk, eating dinner, going to bed. Then nothing again until I walked up that morning. Not a single motion-triggered photo in the middle of the night. I checked the timestamps twice. I started thinking maybe I dreamed the whole thing. Maybe my brain made it up. But my sleeping bag was still pulled halfway down. My boots were already on. I never sleep like that. And I felt the way I always feel when something's wrong, like my body had been tensed all night, even if I didn't remember it. I packed up and left the clearing as soon as I could. I didn't stop until I hit a town with signal. I uploaded the footage from both cameras to the cloud, just in case. Still have it. Every now and then, I go back and watch the clips, trying to see if I missed something. A shadow, a flicker of movement. Anything. But it's just me. Lying in the van. Completely still. Just waiting for a sound that never shows up on tape. It was late fall, and I was passing through a mid-sized town in Arizona, not far off I-17. I'd been sleeping in my van for about a year by then, mostly on back roads or quiet corners of industrial parks. Not exactly glamorous, but it worked. That night, I parked behind a strip mall, one of those little half-dead ones where only a few stores are still open. There was a laundromat, a vape shop, and a tax place that had already shut down for the season. I pulled in around 10, tucked the van into the farthest corner of the lot where the overhead light barely reached. There weren't any no overnight parking signs. It was quiet, no foot traffic. One sedan a few spaces down, but no one inside. I figured someone had just left it there overnight. I ate a leftover burrito, brushed my teeth with a bottle of water, and climbed into the back. The windows were tinted, and I'd put up blackout curtains, so it felt sealed off. Cozy enough. I listened to a podcast for a while, then turned everything off and settled in. I must have fallen asleep pretty fast, because the next thing I remember was a knock. Not loud. Just a sharp, quick tap-tap on the sliding door. I sat up, still groggy. Checked my phone, 12:17 a.m. I hadn't heard a car pull up. No voices. Just that knock. I crawled up to the front seat and peeked out, careful not to move the curtain much. There was a guy standing by the passenger side. Mid-30s, maybe older. Ball cap, work boots, jeans with grease stains. He was facing the van but not looking directly at me, more like at the paneling. His hands were in his pockets. I cracked the window just enough to talk. He leaned in a little. "Hey, sorry to bother you. Just wondering if the van's for sale." I blinked. "What?" "The van," he said. "You selling it?" I told him no, not interested. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "Didn't mean to bug you." Then he turned and walked off toward the side of the building, not toward a car. Just disappeared around the corner. I watched for a minute, waited to hear a door or engine. Nothing. I sat there for a while, unsure if I should move. But I was dead tired, and he hadn't really done anything. Just asked a question. Weird timing, sure, but maybe he lived nearby or worked in the area. I left the curtains drawn and tried to go back to sleep. I don't think I actually did. Around 2:40 a.m., I heard a vehicle pull in. Not close, but somewhere in the lot. The sound bounced off the building's weird, so I couldn't tell where exactly. It idled for a bit, then went quiet. No doors. No footsteps. I stayed still. Didn't open the curtain. Just waited. Nothing happened for maybe 20 minutes. Then I heard it. Snick. A short metallic sound. Not loud. Not fast. Just that clipped snick of metal on metal. Then again. Snick. It took a second for my brain to place it. Bolt cutters. I eased up toward the front again, heart pounding. I peeled back the corner of the curtain less than an inch. And there he was. Same guy. Same jeans. Same hat. But now he had bolt cutters in his hands and was standing next to the rear doors. Behind him, about 10 feet away, was a pickup truck idling with its lights off. Someone else sat behind the wheel. I could just make out the silhouette through the windshield. The guy ran a gloved hand along the seam of the rear doors, looking down at the latch. He wasn't in a rush. Just methodical. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I felt sweat drip down my ribs under my shirt. He stepped back, looked at the hinges, then turned and walked back to the pickup. The truck's brake lights lit up as the driver shifted into reverse. I thought they were leaving. But instead, the guy opened the tailgate, rummaged around, and pulled something else out, a crowbar or maybe a small pry tool. Then he started walking back. I had maybe 15 seconds. I turned the key in the ignition as quietly as I could, foot off the brake so the lights wouldn't flare up. The dashboard glowed faint blue. I kept the curtains up. I didn't want him to know I was awake until the last second. He was behind the van again, crouched now, messing with the lower door latch. I threw it in drive, slammed the gas, and popped over the parking stop hard enough to make everything in the back rattle. The guy yelled. I heard it clearly through the open window. I tore across the lot, hit the speed bump going way too fast, then swung out onto the main road without even checking for traffic. In the rear view, I saw the truck lurch forward, headlights flicking on, but it didn't follow. I didn't stop until I hit a grocery store parking lot 3 miles away, closer to town, under full lights and with a security car circling. I parked right under a pole light and just sat there with the engine running, hands shaking. When I got out an hour later to check, I saw the scratch marks. Fresh scrapes on the rear latch and a ding near the bottom hinge like someone had tried to jam something in. I never called the cops. I didn't even know what town I was technically in. I just left. Got back on the highway and didn't stop driving until I crossed into California the next morning. I don't park in dark corners anymore. Doesn't matter how tired I am, I pick spots with cameras, people, lights. Even if I can't sleep well. Better to be annoyed by traffic than woken up by someone trying to break in. I'd been stealth camping off and on for a couple years by then. I didn't have some tragic backstory or anything, I just couldn't stomach paying rent in a city where my paycheck barely covered groceries. So I bought a used cargo van, put in a mattress, built out some basic insulation, and told myself I'd only do it for a few months. That was over a year before this happened. I'd gotten good at finding spots where no one would notice me. My favorite kind of place was the back lots of industrial buildings or warehouses. They were usually dead at night, tucked away behind fences or loading docks, and no one really patrolled them unless they had active security, which I always checked for first. This spot seemed perfect. It was outside Sacramento, in one of those business parks that's busy all day but goes dead quiet after 6. I pulled in around 9:30 p.m. on a Sunday. The place had a few rows of parking, all asphalt, with just a couple tall light poles casting a yellow haze. I backed in close to the wall of a beige warehouse. No signs, no cameras that I could see. The lot was empty except for one other vehicle parked way across, maybe 70 yards away, near the edge where the lot met a thin patch of trees. It was an old SUV. Dark green or black. Windows tinted. No headlights, no interior light, no movement. I figured maybe someone else had the same idea I did. Sometimes other van lifers or truckers use these lots too. I always tried not to assume the worst about stuff like that. I ate a sandwich cold out of the cooler, cleaned up with a baby wipe, and settled into the back. Curtains drawn, everything quiet. I read for a bit and listened for any sounds outside. Nothing, no doors, no engines, no voices. The SUV was still sitting there when I peeked through the curtain an hour later. Still dark, still facing me. That was the first thing that started to bug me. It was parked nose out toward me, which is weird if you're trying to sleep in your car. Most people back in. And the fact that it hadn't moved at all, it made the hair on my neck stand up a little. But again, I figured maybe they fell asleep, or they were gone and left it there. Whatever. It got colder, and I slipped into my sleeping bag. I kept the back windows cracked an inch for airflow and had the fan on low. Eventually, I stopped checking the curtain and tried to drift off. I almost did. Then I heard something. Not a loud bang or footsteps, Just a low metallic creak, like weight shifting on old suspension. It was faint, but it was the kind of sound you notice when everything else is dead silent. I didn't move. Just lay there, eyes open, listening. I was trying to figure out if it came from the SUV. I waited 5 minutes. Then 10. Nothing else. I slid forward slowly and peeled back a corner of the curtain to check again. The SUV was still there. Still facing me. But the headlights were fogged now more than before. Like someone had breathed on them, or condensation had built up inside. It hadn't rained. The temp had dropped, sure, but I'd never seen headlights fogged that fast unless someone was inside. I watched for a while, barely blinking. No movement. Then I noticed something that made my chest tighten. The driver's side door was cracked open. Not wide, just a few inches. It hadn't been like that earlier. I was sure of it. I dropped the curtain and crawled back into the sleeping bag, heart pounding. I grabbed my flashlight and slid it under my pillow just in case. I didn't want to run my engine or make noise. If someone was out there watching, I didn't want them to know I was awake. Maybe 30 minutes passed. I must have drifted off for real this time because I remember coming out of a light sleep to the sound of something tapping metal. Not sharp, not rhythmic. Just soft. Tap. Pause. Tap tap. Pause. I held my breath and listened. It wasn't near the front windows. It sounded like it was near the side panel where the sliding door is. I stayed still. Then, nothing. Just silence again. Long enough for me to wonder if I imagined it. I started counting in my head to calm down. When I got to 60, I let out a breath and turned over, trying to tell myself I'd make it through the night and be gone by sunrise. I don't know how long I lay there, half asleep, on edge. Could have been 20 minutes. Could have been an hour. But then came the knock. One single, loud knock on the back doors. Not the side, the back. Right where I had my feet. Sharp and flat, like a knuckle on metal. I shot upright. Didn't say a word. Didn't move to open the curtain. Just sat frozen, every nerve in my body locked up. I waited. Listened. No footsteps. No voices. Just that buzzing, high-pitched hum of the parking lot lights. I finally moved, slow as I could, and looked through the tiny crack at the bottom of the curtain. No one. No shadow. No movement at all. I wanted to believe it was just something falling, or an animal. But there were no trees, no breeze, and the sound had been deliberate. I slid into the front seat, turned the ignition without headlights, and eased out of the space. The dashboard clock said 4:08 a.m. I kept the lights off until I hit the main road. Once I turned them on, I checked the rearview mirror. The SUV was gone. I hadn't heard it start up. Hadn't seen the brake lights. It was just no longer there. I drove to a truck stop an hour outside the city and parked between two semis. Didn't sleep the rest of the night. Next morning, I walked around the van just to be sure. There were no scratches, no marks, nothing disturbed. But there was a single, small smudge on the rear door. Like a fingerprint, streaked slightly. Right where the knock had come from. After that, I stopped camping near empty warehouses. Too easy to hide. Too easy for someone to sit and wait without ever being seen. I pulled into the trailhead lot around 7 p.m., just as the last bit of sun was slipping behind the ridge. It was way up in the mountains, 2 hours of winding forest roads, then a final stretch of gravel with no signs and barely enough space for one car to pass. I found the trail online, buried in some old hiking forum. No reviews, no photos, just a GPS coordinate and a note that said hard to find, totally worth it. That was good enough for me. I'd been living in the van for a while by then, driving west, hiking when I could, sleeping in pullouts and forest lots. The remoteness of this place was kind of the point. The trailhead had one other car, an older Subaru wagon, plates from Nevada. It was dusty, like it had been there a few days, and the windows were fogged. No one inside. I parked a few spots down, killed the engine, and stepped out to stretch. It was silent. Like truly silent. No traffic, no wind, just the ticking of my engine cooling and the faint pop of pine needles settling under the tires. The lot was basically a loop around a big patch of gravel and dirt, tucked into the tree line. It had a metal trail map that was mostly faded and a bear-proof trash bin that looked like it hadn't been emptied in weeks. I thought about hiking in a little ways and setting up camp off the trail, but something about the dark felt heavier than usual. So I stayed in the van. I locked up, made dinner on my little camp stove, read for a bit, and got in the back around 10. I wasn't nervous exactly, just alert. My phone had no bars. Not even one. I wasn't surprised. I'd driven 45 minutes past the last gas station. I plugged it in anyway and kept it close. At some point I drifted off. I woke up to silence again, but now it was darker. Middle of the night dark. I didn't know what had stirred me, but I had that weird sense of having surfaced from sleep too fast, like my body knew something before my brain caught up. I stayed still for a while, eyes open in the dark. Then I heard it. Crunch. A footstep. Slow. Heavy. On gravel. Then another. Closer. I sat up slowly and leaned toward the driver's side, careful not to touch the curtain. More footsteps. Definitely feet. Moving around the van, not fast, just circling. Then it went quiet again. I waited. Counted to 60 in my head. Nothing. Then, just as I started to think maybe it was a deer or some big animal, the van jolted. Like someone had slammed their full body into the back doors. I jumped and grabbed my phone, but I didn't turn on the screen. My heart was hammering. Then came the whisper. "You're trespassing." It came from just outside the back doors. Low. Breathy. Like someone pressing their mouth right up to the metal. Before I could even react, the whole van started shaking. Side to side, hard enough to make the windows rattle. Like someone had both hands on the bumper and was trying to flip the thing over. "You're trespassing," the voice whispered again. Louder now. Right next to the side panel. I fumbled with my phone, trying to turn it on. No signal. I opened the dial pad anyway, not even sure what I was doing. The shaking kept going, a solid 10 seconds of violent, back and forth motion, then it just stopped. Nothing. No more whispering. No more footsteps. I stayed there frozen, phone clutched in my hands, staring at the ceiling. I didn't dare open the curtain. I didn't want to see whoever was out there. I didn't want them to know I was awake. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Not a sound. Finally, I leaned forward and looked out through the gap in the front curtain. The lot was empty. No lights. No movement. Just darkness beyond the reach of the dome light. The Subaru was still there. That much I could make out in the moonlight. But no new cars. No flashlights. No figures. I waited until dawn. Never slept again. Just sat up in the driver's seat with the doors locked and my hand on the key. As soon as the sun came up enough to light the trees, I started the van and backed out. As I turned, I passed the Subaru. I couldn't help myself. I looked inside. There was a jacket crumpled in the driver's seat and an old coffee cup in the cup holder, but no gear. No food. No sleeping bag or cooler. Just empty. It didn't look abandoned. Just parked. But no one ever came back for it while I was there. I got to the ranger station around noon. Told them what happened. The guy at the desk just nodded like he'd heard weird stuff before, wrote something down on a clipboard, and thanked me for reporting it. That was it. I don't camp at trailheads anymore. Doesn't matter how remote or quiet or peaceful it looks. Somewhere, someone else might think you don't belong there. I parked just off the edge of the city park, one of those small, scrappy places with more weeds than grass and a few battered picnic tables. It was late fall, maybe early November, so it was already getting dark around 6. I was crashing there for the night because my apartment was under renovation and my van was the only place I could stay. I pulled in right around dusk, found a spot near some overgrown bushes that blocked the streetlight enough to keep my windows mostly dark. I covered every window with those reflective sunshades I taped to cardboard, makeshift but effective. I don't like people looking inside. Privacy was the whole point. The park was quiet, just a few distant cars on the main roads. I kept the van's interior lights off, ate a quick sandwich, and tried to relax. My phone was dead. I'd forgotten my charger, so no music, no messages, just the silence of the city at night. Around 9 p.m., I noticed a guy walking on the sidewalk nearby. He wasn't doing anything, just pacing back and forth. Wearing a hoodie, hands in his pockets. I watched him for a few minutes from the front windshield. He never looked my way, just kept walking. After about an hour, he was still there, still pacing, sometimes stopping and staring at the park, sometimes at the streetlights. I thought about rolling the windows down and asking if he needed help, but the feeling was off. Like maybe he was waiting for someone or something. So I kept quiet. I didn't see him leave. Between 11 p.m. and midnight, I heard some rustling on the roof of the van. I froze. I tried to tell myself it was just a squirrel or a raccoon, but it wasn't the light scampering I'd expect. It sounded heavier, like footsteps. Slow, careful. Like someone was walking, not running, not scrambling. I pressed my back to the driver's seat, heart pounding, fingers clutching my phone even though it was dead. I debated calling 911, but what would I say? No signal anyway. The footsteps stopped after maybe 5 minutes. I didn't breathe until I heard nothing else. No scratching, no rustling, just silence again. I stayed awake the rest of the night, eyes glued to the mirrors, trying to catch any movement outside. Around 3 a.m., the pacing guy was back. Or maybe he never left. I don't know. This time he was standing just out of the streetlight's reach, near the edge of the park. He was still wearing the same hoodie, but this time I saw his face, just barely. Pale, kind of gaunt, and his eyes caught the light, staring right at the van. I blinked. When I looked again, he was gone. At 4 a.m., I finally dozed off for a bit. I was startled awake by a loud thud on the roof, like someone stomped. I sat up fast, the van shaking slightly from the impact. I grabbed the small pocket knife I keep on the dashboard and peered out the front window. Nothing visible in the dark. I kept hearing the occasional thump, once near the front, once at the middle, then by the back doors. I stayed frozen until the sky started lightening, the first gray hint of dawn slipping through the cracks of my sunshades. I waited a few more minutes, then slowly peeled back the edge of the driver's side curtain and pushed open the door just a crack. Nothing but cold air and silence. The lot was empty. Then I looked at the windshield. There it was. A single, worn boot sitting on the glass. Muddy, scuffed, the laces frayed. No footprints anywhere else around the van. No other sign of anyone. I grabbed the boot with a trembling hand and slammed the door shut. I didn't wait. I fired up the engine and peeled out of that spot, driving away before the sun was fully up. I didn't look back. I didn't even realize something was wrong until I got out of the grocery store. I'd parked my old beat-up car in the far end of the lot, near some bushes, because it was late and the place wasn't busy. I was just grabbing a few things, milk, some snacks, and I figured it'd be quick. The whole trip was maybe 15 minutes. When I got back, the first thing I noticed was how quiet everything was. No cars pulling in or out, just the hum of the parking lot lights. That was normal at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, I guess. But then I looked at my car, and it hit me. My hood was covered with something small and shiny, lined up in a weird little row. I walked closer and saw what they were, lug nuts. All 8 of them, just sitting there, spaced out evenly across the hood like someone had taken the time to line them up like that. I froze. I looked down at my tires. They all looked fine, no flat spots, no deflated ones, nothing. But that didn't make sense. How did all my lug nuts end up on the hood, and the tires were still holding air? Someone had definitely messed with my car. The first thing I thought was that it had to be some kind of joke. Maybe a prank from some kids in the neighborhood, or someone screwing around with me. But I didn't recognize anything around, and the car looked undisturbed otherwise. No scratches, no dents, nothing weird. Then I remembered the dash cam. I'd left it running because I'd been thinking about selling the car, and I wanted to record any weird stuff that happened while parked. I pulled out my phone to check the footage, except there was nothing. The card was wiped clean. Like, completely erased, not even a single file on it. That part didn't sit right with me. The dash cam couldn't just erase itself. Someone had to have done it. I scanned the parking lot, looking for anyone or anything. There was no one around. No other cars nearby either, just the streetlights, the grocery store's automatic doors, and that faint smell of trash from the dumpsters on the far side. I checked my phone for signal. Full bars. Called my roommate to tell him what was going on, just to have someone to talk to. Told him I'd stay in the car and wait until he could come pick me up. I locked all the doors, but every time I glanced in the mirrors, I felt like someone was watching from the shadows behind the trees lining the lot. I kept hearing small sounds, rustling leaves, something scraping against the pavement, but every time I looked, nothing was there. At one point, I noticed a car parked 2 rows over. It was dark, no lights on, and looked like it had been there a while. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see inside, but the way it was angled made me uncomfortable, like it was waiting, just sitting and watching. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe someone was just parking overnight, or working a late shift. But every few minutes, I caught movement around that car. I'd see a shadow cross in front of the headlights or a flicker of a figure slipping behind it. The longer I sat, the more I realized my heart was beating way too fast. My hands were sweaty, even though it was cold out. I considered leaving, but I was worried about the tires. If someone had taken off the lug nuts, maybe they planned to slash my tires or steal the wheels. I couldn't risk driving on it. I called my roommate back and told him to hurry. While I waited, I checked my car again. The lug nuts were still on the hood, No sign anyone had tried to move them. I touched one carefully. It was cold but dry. I looked around for footprints or tire tracks, but the pavement was too worn and dirty to tell. Then I noticed something else. My rearview mirror was tilted down, almost like someone had adjusted it from outside. I swore I hadn't touched it that way. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. After about 20 minutes, I saw movement again near the dark car. This time, I saw a figure emerge, a man, mid-40s maybe, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. He moved slowly, looking around like he was checking if anyone was watching. He walked toward the far side of my car, out of sight. I locked my doors and started the engine, slowly backing up. The man stopped and stared at me, but didn't come closer. I pulled out of the lot and sped away, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. The whole way home, I kept checking my tires in the rearview mirror. No flats, but I knew I couldn't trust that. I made it back safe, but I haven't parked in that grocery lot again. I never figured out what the guy wanted or why he took the lug nuts off but didn't do more damage. Maybe he was testing me, or maybe he was just scaring me for some sick reason. I changed my locks that night and installed extra lights around my place. And I never left my car unattended for that long again. I was crashing at a friend's place in a quiet suburb for a few days while my apartment got fumigated. It was one of those neighborhoods where everyone keeps their yards neat, and the streets are so quiet you can hear a dog bark a few blocks away. I wasn't used to the silence, honestly. It felt kind of empty but peaceful, so I didn't mind. The first night, I parked my car on the street and just crashed on the couch. The house had this old school charm, but the locks on the doors felt cheap, those little sliding locks that are easy to flip but not the most secure. My friend assured me no one ever bothered with stuff around here, so I didn't think twice about it. That night, I passed out early. The kind of tired where your body just shuts down. The whole house was quiet, and I was pretty beat from moving boxes earlier that day. Around 3 a.m., I woke up with a start. It was that kind of waking where you're not sure what just happened. I thought I heard the side door slide open. The sliding door was right next to where I was sleeping, a glass door that led to the backyard. It had one of those thin metal locks that just slide sideways to lock or unlock it. At first, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But then I heard it again, the soft but clear sliding sound, like someone was opening that door. I froze. The room was pitch dark except for some faint streetlight filtering in through the curtains. I reached over to my phone for the flashlight and tried to turn it on quietly, but my hands were shaking. When I finally clicked it on, the light caught the door. It was still locked. I felt my heart hammer in my chest. I got up slowly, trying not to make noise, and checked the door. The sliding lock was in place. No sign it had been moved. No scratches on the frame, no forced entry. Nothing. I checked all the windows and doors in the house. Everything was locked tight. My friend's room was just down the hall, so I knocked lightly, but there was no answer. I guess they were up that night or asleep deeply. I stood there for what felt like forever, listening. The house was so quiet again it almost felt unnatural. Then I heard something else, a soft shuffle, like someone was stepping lightly on the wooden deck outside the sliding door. I peeked through the curtain with my phone light but couldn't see anything. No shadows, no movement. I checked the backyard from the front window. It was just a dark yard and some bushes, nothing unusual. I went back to bed but kept the phone close, flashlight ready. Every little sound made me jump, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of a car passing by, even the wind rustling the trees felt too loud. I kept thinking about that sliding door. How it could have made that noise without actually opening. The next morning, I told my friend what happened. They said maybe the lock was loose or the wind pushed the door a bit. I wanted to believe that, but it didn't explain the shuffling outside or the fact that the door was definitely locked when I checked. I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, but then I noticed something else. The small potted plant near the sliding door had been knocked over, soil spilled on the deck. That wasn't there before I went to sleep. I asked my friend again, but they shrugged it off. Maybe a raccoon or something, they said, but the plant was heavy and the soil spread looked like something dragged it. That night, I slept with the couch pushed away from the sliding door, my back against the wall. I didn't hear anything else, but the feeling of being watched stayed with me the whole time. Before I left town, I told my friend to get some extra locks and maybe a security camera, just in case. I never found out who, or what, was messing around that night, but I'm pretty sure someone was standing just outside that door, sliding it gently to get in, but stopping before it actually opened. And whoever it was didn't want me to know they were there. I never thought much about parking near that old industrial area on the edge of town, but it was late, and I just needed to crash for a few hours. The warehouse district was mostly deserted at night, big empty buildings, cracked concrete, and barely any streetlights. I figured it was quiet enough to sleep in my van without bothering anyone. I parked near a row of loading docks, pulled the curtains on the windows, and stretched out on the back bench seat. I wasn't really planning to sleep long, just enough to keep going. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of a train somewhere far off. The kind of silence that makes every little sound pop out sharp. I don't remember exactly when I dozed off, but sometime after midnight, I woke up suddenly. It was the breathing. At first, I thought it was my own, but then it got too loud, like it was right next to the window. I froze for a second, straining to hear. The breathing was slow, steady, and close. I turned my head toward the window and glanced through the thin curtain. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, out of the corner of my eye, a shadow moved. I blinked and looked again. There was a man crouched just beside the van, right under the window I was looking through. He was holding a tire iron, the kind you use to change tires, the long metal bar with a little curve at the end. He was gripping it loosely but with purpose. His smile was what got me the most. Not friendly, not nervous. Just a flat, calm smile that didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were fixed on me, cold and steady. I couldn't move. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I didn't even blink. He just stayed there, smiling like that. The street was dead quiet except for his breathing and mine. I wanted to scream or slam the door, but I was frozen. After what felt like forever, he shifted slightly, and I noticed his other hand was lightly tapping the tire iron against the pavement, a soft tap tap tap, slow and steady. My mind raced. He could have been out here a while, watching me sleep, waiting for me to drop my guard. Maybe trying to decide something. I finally pulled my phone out of my pocket and slowly turned on the flashlight, careful not to move the van too much. The light hit him square in the face. His smile didn't change. Then, without a word, he stood up and disappeared into the shadows. I waited a long time after that, sitting completely still, watching the empty lot. I wasn't sure if he left or was just hiding. Eventually, I started the van and pulled out slowly. I didn't look back. When I told people later, some said maybe he was just a homeless guy or someone messing around. But the calm, cold way he looked at me, the way he held that tire iron, it wasn't random. It was deliberate. I don't park near that industrial area anymore. I pulled off the forest road just past sunset, following a narrow pull-off that wasn't much more than a widened dirt shoulder. There weren't any other cars for miles, just pines reaching up into the darkening sky and a sliver of moon peeking through the branches. I'd been on the road for 2 days straight, chasing a job interview in the next town, and I just needed to sleep somewhere out of sight. I figured this spot was perfect, quiet, hidden, no signs or gates. I killed the engine and sat for a minute, listening to the woods settle into night. My van was the only thing parked there. I made myself a sandwich under the glow of the dome light, washed the crumbs off with a baby wipe, and slipped into the back where I'd built a little bed platform. I left the windows cracked an inch for fresh air and turned on a small clip-on fan. No music, no podcasts, just the low hum of the fan and the occasional creak of the fan cooling off. At first, everything sounded normal. Crickets in the brush, a distant owl, the soft sigh of wind through the leaves. I drifted off thinking about the interview, hoping I could still make it if I got up early. I woke to the fan still buzzing, but everything else had gone silent. The crickets stopped. No wind in the trees. My heart beat harder when I noticed how abruptly the night noises had cut out. I lay there unmoving, staring at the ceiling, ear straining for any hint of life outside. Maybe a raccoon rustling through leaves, I told myself. Or the wind dropping suddenly. I blinked once, twice, and listened harder. That's when I heard footsteps. Soft, deliberate steps on gravel, heading up the slope where I'd parked. They started slow, like someone testing the ground, then picked up pace a bit firm, unhurried. I pictured a pair of boots crunching over sticks, but I didn't dare move to look. I recognized that feeling. Someone was coming close enough to see me if they looked. My stomach tightened. I reached beside me for my phone, but the screen was dead. No service out here. I considered grabbing the pocket knife I stashed under the seat, but I didn't want to fumble in the dark and give away that I was awake. The footsteps stopped right by the passenger side door. I heard a soft scrape, maybe someone leaning against the van. I squeezed my eyes shut, heart slamming. Then came the knock. 3 taps, flat and calm, like someone rapping code. "Hey," a voice said. Quiet, even. Not angry, not shouting. "Are you the one who called for help?" I stared at the curtain, my whole body rigid. I didn't answer. I hadn't called for help. I'd barely even thought about this spot. Why would someone think I did? The voice came again, a little closer. "I'm in a truck down the road," said someone was in distress. "Are you that person?" My throat felt dry. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I heard his breath against the metal. Then the van shook slightly, as if he pushed on it to get attention. I remembered the knife. Carefully, I slid my hand under the seat and felt the cold steel handle. I gripped it tight, even though it did me no good in a 6x6 van with no room to swing. The knocking stopped. I held my breath, waiting to hear more movement, footsteps, shuffling, anything. After a long pause, the voice spoke again, softer now. "Look, if you need help, come out. I'm not gonna hurt you." I didn't move. I didn't trust it. I wondered if this was some sick joke, someone luring me out. Or worse, a trap. He turned away. I heard the soft scrape of gravel as he walked back. Then another set of steps, farther down, leading away. I stayed tense for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 5 minutes. I didn't dare breathe until I heard the engine rev, a truck starting somewhere in the dark. Then that too faded off. Even after the sound died, the woods stayed quiet. No crickets. No wind. Just the van, idling in the hush. I banged on the wall between me and the front seat to remind myself I was there. My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped my knife. I waited until the moon dipped behind a cloud and the forest settled back into its normal chorus, then slid the curtain aside enough to peek at the road. Nothing but trees and the faint dust trail where the truck had been. No headlights, no tail lights, nothing. My pulse was still racing. I debated sticking it out until dawn, but I didn't trust this place anymore. Whoever that was might circle back or bring someone else. I climbed into the front, doors locked, engine off, and tried the headlights. They flickered on low beam light reaching into the trees. I pressed the clicker to lock the doors again, then fired up the engine. The radio crackled with static, which felt like company. I eased out of the pull-off and onto the dirt road, tires stirring up dust that glowed in the headlights. I drove slowly at first, eyes scanning either side for movement. After a mile, I picked up speed, but not enough to kick up too much noise. I didn't look in the rear view. I didn't want to see if headlights followed me. I just kept going until I hit a main road and found a 24-hour diner. I parked in full view, sat inside drinking coffee until the sun came up. I never saw that truck again. I never knew who came to my door or why they thought I'd called for help. But I knew I wasn't safe there alone. When I finally hit the highway, I kept driving until I found a motel, a real one with a check-in desk and cameras. I paid in cash, double-checked the locks, and slept with the lights on. I pulled into the shadow of that hotel's parking lot just after dusk, slipping off the main road onto a cracked side street. I'd been driving since sunrise, chasing cooler air and pine trees, but I ran out of daylight miles ago. The hotel was too bright and busy for stealth camping, but just around back there was a patch of gravel under a tall street lamp that didn't quite reach the weeds. I figured if I parked there, curtains drawn, I'd be invisible. I backed the van in nose first, windows facing the lot, then threw up my blackout shades. The engine clicked shut, and everything went quiet except for the hum of that distant street lamp. I cracked the front vent a crack, enough for air and the smell of fresh asphalt. I killed the lights, grabbed my headlamp, and made a sandwich in the front seat, turkey on stale bread, nothing fancy. I ate with my feet on the dash, listening to the soft buzz of the mini fridge cooling in back. Behind me was the hotel entrance, bright with neon and people coming and going. Families dragging suitcases, guys in suits charging to a conference room, someone in a robe fumbling keys. I watched for a while, feeling a little safe seeing traffic. Then I climbed back into the bed platform, pulled the curtain shut, and set my alarm for 2 hours later, just enough to wake me in check. I dozed off at some point, but not deeply. Around midnight, I woke to a clicking sound. I froze, blinking in the dark. Then I heard it again, faint and steady, footsteps on gravel. I held my breath. My van sat maybe 20 feet from the hotel sidewalk. I didn't hear any cars, just those clicks stepping across broken stones. I lay still, rolled onto my side, and peeked through the tiniest crack in the curtain. A man passed in the glow of the hotel lights, jeans, a dark jacket, hands in his pockets. He had a thin build and walked with a slow, easy stride. I only caught a glimpse of his face in profile, long nose, pale skin. He didn't look up at the van. He just kept walking along the front of the lot, toward the exit, then cut back down the row where I was parked. That was the first time. He moved past like he was on some aimless patrol, calm and unhurried. I shut the curtain and lay back, heart thudding. Maybe he worked there? Hotel security doing rounds? But he wasn't wearing a uniform. No badge, no vest, nothing that looked official. My alarm buzzed at 2 a.m. I rubbed my eyes, yawned, and peeked again. Sure enough, the man was returning. Same slow walk, same dark jacket, same poker face. He passed right in front of my driver's side window. I held my breath while he moved on, then let it out once he'd gone. I checked my phone, no signal. Of course. I closed my eyes and thought about switching spots, maybe moving to a rest stop further down the road. But I was exhausted, and the rest stop would be a mess. So I stayed. 40 minutes later, I woke to a soft knock on the fan's side panel. It sounded almost muffled by the thin aluminum. I froze. That knock should have come from the man walking by outside. He'd be over that side. I waited a few seconds. No more knocks. Just the hush of the fridge and the ticking of the interior light circuit. I didn't dare look. I laid there, heart pounding, waiting for something else, but nothing happened. No footsteps. No voices. Just the distant pulsing sign over the hotel entrance. I must have fallen asleep, because next thing I knew, my blanket slipped off my arm and I woke with my hand tangled in the sheet. It was 3:15 a.m. I rubbed my arm, felt goosebumps. I wondered if I dreamed the knock. Then I heard footsteps right outside the passenger door. Soft, slow, deliberate again. I crouched up and unzipped the curtain just enough to see. There he was. The same guy, standing close enough that I could see the stripe of light on his cheek where it hit his jawline. He was looking straight at me, expression blank. I ducked back and slammed against the mattress, heart thumping. He didn't move on, though. He just stood there behind the wheel well, facing the fan, like he was waiting for me to reappear. My grip tightened on the knife I kept under my pillow. I thought about starting the engine, but the roar of the road would give away my blind spot until I could turn headlights on. I swallowed hard and laid back, pretending to sleep. After what felt like 10 minutes, the footsteps moved away, toward the hotel again. I stayed still until the crunch of gravel faded. Then I opened the curtain fast, peered out. Empty lot. No one there. The hotel entrance was lit as always, but no sign of a man. I climbed into the front seat, hands still shaking, and tried the dome light. It flicked on, painting the lot in yellow. I scanned every shadow. Nothing. I locked the doors, but that felt pointless. The man had gotten close enough once already. I thought about calling for help, but I had no bars. I thought about pounding on the side of the van to scare him off, but I didn't know if that would make him angry instead. I slid behind the wheel and idled for a minute. Then I thought, just wait. If security was doing rounds, they'd spot me before I could drive off. So I shut the engine, sat there with every muscle clenched, and let time crawl. Around 4 a.m., I fingered the key fob and clicked the lock button. The horn beeped once. Bright headlights from the hotel parking lot swept past my van as a car pulled out. The engine revved and the lights went out. I watched the beam pass over the gravel, illuminating a dark jacket draped over the hood of a sedan parked a few spots down. No one in sight. My chest felt tight. I threw the door open and ran around the front of the van to check. The jacket was just folded there, no name tag, nothing. The hood was cold to the touch. I left it where it was. Back in the driver's seat, I sat for another half hour. Then, just as the sky bled pale orange, I turned the key and drove out of that lot without a backward glance. Later, I checked hotel reviews online. People complained about strange lights at night, cars idling with no one inside, noises outside their rooms. Some mentioned a guy who wandered the property asking odd questions, but no one knew who he was or why he was there. Management shrugged it off. I never found out who that man was, or why he circled my van all night, or why he pressed the key card against the glass. All I know is that I didn't call for help. Nobody did. And when I pulled onto the highway, I kept my eyes on every mirror and my doors locked tight. I'd been on the road for days, sleeping in my old cargo van whenever I could find someplace quiet. That night I parked off a gravel logging road, wheels half on dirt, half on pine needles, about 2 miles from the nearest trailhead. I'd driven until my eyes blurred, found this little pull-off where no one seemed to come, and figured I'd crash until morning. I ate cold beans out of a can, washed them down with water, brushed my teeth in the back sink, and climbed into the makeshift bed I built. I taped cardboard over the windows and left a vent cracked just enough for air. The forest felt heavy around me, just the low hum of the fan and the distant hoot of an owl. I'd been too tired to notice anything else. I woke once, somewhere around 1 a.m., to the sound of dripping water. At first I thought it was condensation from the vent, but it kept time, like someone tapping a finger on metal. Drip, pause, drip, pause. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the pattern to break. After maybe 10 drips, it just stopped. I tried to go back to sleep, but my heart was racing. When I finally nodded off again, it wasn't deep. I dreamed I was driving down a road full of strangers staring out of their car windows. I woke sweating, my ear pressed to the thin wall, listening for my heartbeat. There was nothing, no drip, no bug noises, just a quiet so total it felt empty. Then I heard footsteps. Soft, crunch, crunch, crunch over gravel. They weren't fast, more like someone testing the ground. I snapped awake and froze, every muscle locked. The footsteps moved around the front of the van, then paused. I didn't breathe. My mind flipped through possibilities: wild animal, neighbor hiker, creeper looking for trouble. After a minute that felt like forever, I heard another sound, 2 voices, low and muffled, like people arguing behind a closed door. I couldn't make out the words at first, just the tone, one voice sharp, the other calmer, almost coaxing. "I don't know," the sharp one said. "He's camping alone out here." "Weird setup," the calm one replied. "But look at it, just a van, no gear. Could be nothing." "Risky," the first voice said. "Could be a cop, could be a guy with a gun." "He's alone," the second answered. "Could be easy." My spine felt tight. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from calling out. The voices drifted closer, like they were walking beside the driver's side. I could hear their shoes scrape at the step where you open the door. The sharp voice muttered, "Is he worth it?" A pause. Then the other responded, "Only one way to find out." My heart pounded. I fumbled for the tiny pocket knife I kept under the mattress, but my fingers knocked against the metal wall as I sat up the last inch. The second the van shuddered, me accidentally bumping it, the voices cut off like a light switch. Silent. I froze, listening for any sign of movement. Nothing. No footsteps receding, no whispers. Just emptiness. I sat for a long time in the dark, heart slamming, thinking maybe they'd never been there at all. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks. But then I dared to peek out the front windshield. No headlights. No flashlights. The gravel was smooth again. I waited a few minutes, long enough for my chest to unclench a little, then quietly unzipped the driver's side curtain. I peeked at the ground, no footprints. The pine needles looked undisturbed. Whatever had been there had melted back into the darkness. I closed the curtain and leaned against the wheel well, trying to think. They'd heard me move, they'd known I was awake. If they were still out there, they could try the door. I tested the lock, still clicked shut. I kept the key in the ignition, engine off, lights off. My mind raced. I knew this road went on for miles, no intersections, no houses. If I drove off now, I'd be in the trees, headlights blazing, drawing attention. But staying felt worse. I warmed up a bottle of water by the engine heat, sipped it to calm my nerves. Then I slowly opened the side door just enough to peek down the road. Thick trees framed a single ribbon of gravel. No sign of a truck, no glint of metal anywhere. I took a deep breath, pulled the knife's little blade out and tucked it in my belt. Cranked the engine, but left it idle. The fan shivered. I clicked on the dome light just enough to see my hands shaking on the wheel. I shifted into drive and rolled forward a few feet, watching the curtain edge. Nothing moved. I went another 10 feet, creeping, lights off. The van's headlight beams drifted into the trees, spotlighting nothing but trunks and branches. When I hit the next clearing, I floored it. The tires sprayed gravel, the fan roared, and the van lurched forward. I didn't stop until I hit pavement 2 miles later at the ranger station parking lot, where I could image someone seeing the lights. I killed the engine there, doors locked, and sat in the glow of the street lamps. My hand shook so bad I dropped the knife. I breathed heavily until the sun started to tint the sky gray. Before I left, I checked the spot where I'd been parked. Nothing changed. No footprints, no scraps of clothing, no sign anything had happened. Just the smell of pine and gravel. I never went back out that way again. The forest looked the same, but I didn't belong there anymore. Somewhere, 2 people decided I was worth the risk. I'd been driving all day and figured I'd pull off on a side road just past sunset. There was this gravel lot next to an empty field, no signs, no lights, just a white patch of stones where maybe 1 car could fit. I checked my GPS twice. It wasn't private property, just some county land. Perfect for stealth camping, or so I thought. I parked in the middle of the lot, cut the engine, and sat for a minute in the dark. The radio was static, no bars this far out. I cracked my window a bit for air and turned on the dome light just long enough to heat up some water for ramen. Outside, crickets chattered and I thought I heard a distant train whistle. It didn't bother me. I'd slept worse. After I ate, I crawled into the back and zipped up my sleeping bag. I left 2 windows cracked so I wouldn't wake up stifled. My phone lay next to me, dead battery, and I figured I'd look at the map in the morning. At some point, I must have drifted off, but not deeply. A few hours later, I woke to the van shivering like a rustling, low thrum against the body. At first I thought it was the wind picking up, but the doors were shut tight and the fence barely moved. My heart skipped when I heard a soft click like plastic snapping into place. I stared at the ceiling, listening. Outside, the crickets had gone quiet. Even the breeze had died. I lay there for maybe 10 minutes, sweat beating at my hairline, waiting for something else. But nothing came. The van sat perfectly still in the dark. Morning came slow. When the east sky finally lit up, I unzipped the curtain and climbed into the front seat. My legs felt like jelly. I rubbed my eyes and yawned, then reached for the door handle to get out and stretch. My hand hit something, smooth black loops of plastic around every single door handle, front and back. I froze. Zip ties. Looped loosely, but tight enough that the handles wouldn't move. I looked around the empty lot. No other cars. No footprints in the gravel beyond my own tire tracks. Nothing except my van in the field beyond. I sat back, heart pounding, and checked each handle. Yep, everyone had a zip tie. None were cut. None seemed old or weathered. They were fresh. No other sign someone had been there. No footprints, no discarded ties, no tool marks on the plastic. I felt trapped, like the van was a cage. I tried the handles again, nothing budged. I even pressed the button on my key fob, hoping the locks would free the ties somehow. No click, no light, just the fob's useless beep. My mind raced. Why zip ties? Why leave them? Was someone watching me all night? I remembered the click I heard and the sudden silence. It wasn't wind. Someone had been outside. I took my pocket knife from the dash and slipped out the blade. Carefully, I cut each tie: front passenger, front driver, sliding doors, back doors. Each one took a couple seconds. My hand shook so bad I nicked my finger on the plastic. A tiny bead of blood welled up, but I didn't care. I wanted out. Once the last tie fell to the floor, I locked the doors with the key fob, then unlocked them. The locks clicked solidly. I sat for another minute, doors shut and locked, engine off. I watched the empty lot like I expected to see someone emerge from the field. But nothing happened. I thought about driving away, but the gravel half on my tires made me hesitate. What if someone drove in ahead of me, blocked the exit? I didn't know who'd done this or why. What if they circled back? I took a deep breath and turned the key. The engine rumbled. I eased forward until I was on solid road, then floored it toward the highway. I didn't look back. An hour later, I stopped at a rest area under bright lights and called a friend. I told them what happened. They said maybe it was a prank, someone testing me. But prank or not, they'd known I was there, at that exact spot, and they could mess with me however they wanted. When I got home, I checked my boots for anything stuck: gravel, twigs, maybe an imprint of someone's footprint. Nothing but dirt. I threw the zip ties in the trash. I never camped out on a random gravel lot again. Even when I was desperate, I chose places where someone could see me: a campground, a truck stop, anywhere with lights and people around. I didn't want to be alone in a spot where someone could slip in without a sound and tie me up from the outside, leaving me to wake inside my own prison. I rolled into the alley behind that old Italian place just after midnight. The neon closed sign was flickering, and their metal roll-up door sagged halfway down. I figured nobody would be back there so late, just me and my beat-up van. I killed the engine, let it cool, and cracked the windows for air. At first it was quiet. Too quiet. The city's hush at that hour always threw me off. I heard it drip, probably the gutter over the restaurant, water dropping onto the concrete in slow, random beats. Trip. Pause. Trip. I lay back on the seat and watched the ceiling, feeling miles from home. I'd been on the road for days, chasing a temp job that fell through, so I was tired enough to sleep anywhere. I slapped a Costco blanket over my legs, tossed my phone under my pillow, no signal in this stretch, and closed my eyes. It felt like maybe 10 minutes later that I woke up to a distant siren wailing. Not too close, but loud enough to remind me I was in the city, not out in the woods like I usually camped. The siren faded, then the drip resumed in the same lazy rhythm. I dozed again, half dreaming I was back behind my old apartment, waiting for the bus. I woke for real when I heard scraping metal on concrete somewhere off to my right. My heart ticked in. The alley was pitch dark except for the weak spill of a streetlight at the mouth of the alley. I couldn't see past my mirrors. The scraping came again. Clink scratch, Clink scratch. Like someone dragging a bike chain. I froze, staring at the side window. My own breathing sounded loud in my ears. It stopped. I waited. 5 seconds later, I heard a shuffling step by the front of the van, then another by the sliding door. My muscles locked. I didn't want to breathe. Then a cat yelled from somewhere up the alley, sharp and sudden, and took off running. My tension cracked a little when I heard paws skitter off, fading away. But that scraping, those shuffles, someone had been there. I sank back, trying to tell myself it was a stray messing with a garbage can. The restaurant's dumpsters were 2 spots down, so maybe it was a raccoon. But a raccoon doesn't walk upright. I tapped the dash with a fingernail, nothing rattled. The van was locked tight. I stared at the ceiling, counting ceiling panels to calm down. I drifted off dozing again, but my dreams were restless, running from something I couldn't see. I woke again when the trip stopped entirely. The alley went dead silent, like someone hit mute on the whole world. At 1:07 a.m., my door rattled hard. I bolted upright as if I'd been shot. The van shook under a pounding thump 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 right at the back doors. My stomach dropped. "You stole her," a voice screamed, ragged and close. The whole van shuddered again. "Give her back." I yanked the curtain aside and peeked over the edge of the seat. The alley was empty. No one in the weak half-light, no silhouette by the dumpsters, nothing. I'd seen no cars pull in, so whoever it was had to be sneaking around in the dark. My hands felt numb, like they didn't belong to me. I tried the rear doors, locked. My key fob beeped, but the locks clicked no different. Fear bloomed in my chest. Give her back, the scream echoed once more. My voice caught, I couldn't answer. I had no idea who she was. I didn't know why someone thought I'd taken anybody. The pounding stopped. For a long minute, the only sound was my ragged breathing and the distant hum of traffic. I pressed my ear to the side panel. Nothing moved. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans. I had to get out. I reached behind the seat for my pocket knife, flicked it open, and tucked it into my waistband. I cracked the driver's side door open an inch and peeked out. The alley was empty, deserted. The closed restaurant door was just metal and shadow. I slid back in and closed the door fast. My pulse hammered. I leaned forward and reached for the steering wheel. I flicked on the headlights, bright white beams cutting through the darkness. The light revealed pavement and dumpsters. No one. The license plate on the front of the van was there, shining under the lights, but when I tried to shift into drive, my hand froze. The front plate looked wrong. The edges were jagged, and the screws were gone. My stomach lurched, someone had ripped it off in the night. I bent down to check. Sure enough, the license plate was gone. Nothing but 2 empty holes and rough metal around them. Whoever was out there had wanted to make sure I couldn't be identified. I slammed the door closed, heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my ears. My mind raced, no plate, someone screaming I stole her, pounding on my van, then vanished into thin air. I glanced at the rearview mirror and half expected to see someone sitting behind me. But it was just the alley and the flickering streetlight. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Then I remembered the siren earlier. Police were around. If I drove off right now without a plate, I'd get stopped, questions asked. I needed a plan. I switched off the headlights and willed myself to think. The restaurant's front door had a keypad lock near it. Maybe someone lived or worked next door with cameras. I could knock and ask for help. Risky, maybe they were in on it. But I had to try something. I crept to the front of the building, knife in hand, footsteps soft on the gravel. No movement inside. I rapped on the metal door once, twice. No answer. I pressed my face to the window, dark. I shone my phone light through the glass. Nothing. Then I heard a car door slam behind me. I spun. A white sedan sat idling at the mouth of the alley, headlights off, engine quiet. I couldn't see the driver. My blood ran cold. I had two options: run back to the van with this guy watching, or go further down the dark alley. I chose the alley. I backed away from the restaurant door, keeping to the shadows, and jogged toward the street. My hand shook so bad I nearly dropped the knife. I slipped past the sedan without breaking stride. I risked a glance. The driver window was up, tinted too dark to see inside. The car hadn't moved. I burst onto the main street, heart pounding, and jogged toward a brightly lit 24-hour gas station 3 blocks away. I didn't stop until I was under the harsh fluorescent canopy, standing by the pumps. I pressed my back against the station wall and slid down, knife still in hand. Inside, I called the police. I told them someone ripped off my plate, screamed at me in an alley, and now I was afraid to go back. The dispatcher said they'd send a unit, but it might take a while. I waited in the station, sipping coffee, until a patrol car showed up. I pointed them down the alley. They went in, lights flashing, and I watched from inside as they combed the gravel lot. They found no plates, no footprints, nothing. When they came back, they told me to drive carefully, get my plate replaced, and stay in well-lit areas. I thanked them, paid for more coffee, and got back in my van. I drove out of that neighborhood slow, headlights on high, mirrors checked every few seconds. I didn't see the white sedan again. I haven't parked anywhere without lights or people since. And I always check my door handles and plates before I close my eyes at night. I'd been driving since mid-afternoon, chasing daylight into the mountains. By the time I hit the dead-end road, it was dusk and the trees were swallowing the last of the sun. The road was little more than a gravel track, flanked by pines so close their branches almost met overhead. I pulled my van as far off the tire ruts as I could, killed the engine, and sat for a minute listening to how quiet it was. No cars, no voices, just the hush of needles falling in the woods. I popped the sliding door open and stepped onto soft ground, every crunch of gravel under my boots loud enough to wake someone 100 yards off. I took a quick look around, just trees, mossy boulders, and a moss-covered sign that said rodents in peeling white paint. I made ramen on the camp stove, slurped it down, then rinsed my bowl with lake water I carried in a jug. The air smelled damp, like green wood and earth. Perfect. Back inside the van, I set up my mattress and covered the windows with reflective shades I'd cut to fit. I left a vent crack just enough to hear outside and keep from cooking in my own breath. My phone had 1 bar but no data, so I figured I'd just unplug for the night. I lay down with my boots on my pillow and passed out to the drone of the fan. I jolted awake to a scratching noise. It was faint at first, like claws on wood. I thought maybe it was my imagination, but it repeated, scratch, scratch, scratch. I froze, then realized it was coming from above. The roof of the van. I held my breath, listening to the tin hiss as the noise moved slowly from the front toward the back. My heart ticked up, but I didn't dare move. It stopped right over my head. A moment later, the single ceiling light flickered on, just a loose bulb and a plain fixture, and the fan spun faster. The fan creaked as the metal cooled. I stared into the dark corner of the ceiling, waiting for anything, but nothing moved. Then the fan cut out and everything went silent again. I lay still, eyes stuck open. After a long minute, I shook my head and clicked the light off. Maybe a raccoon had climbed on the roof and wandered off. Could happen. I tried to calm down, counted to 100, then drifted back towards sleep. I woke again to distant voices. They were so low I could have sworn I imagined them, two people talking softly, like they were arguing about something they didn't want me to hear. I pressed my ear to the wall. The voices came from outside, somewhere near the front of the van, but muffled. One voice sounded hesitant. The other was low and steady. Then I heard footsteps, two pairs of boots crunching on gravel. They came close to the driver's side window, stopped, and after a few seconds went on, circling to the back of the van. I wanted to scream, but my throat seized up. I sat up so fast I whacked my head on the ceiling. The voices and footsteps cut out at once. Absolute silence. I waited for what felt like an hour, but it was probably just a few minutes. I didn't dare peek outside. Eventually, I lay back, trembling. I kept thinking about those voices. Who were they? Why were they talking so quietly? I pressed my hand flat against the window, felt the cold glass under my palm. When dawn light finally crept in around the shades, I stretched and sat up. I figured I'd just been spooked, but I had to see what was out there. I unzipped the sliding door slowly, cracking it open an inch. The only sound was a bird calling somewhere in the trees. No people. No cars. The gravel was undisturbed except for my own tire tracks. I climbed into the front seat, rubbing my ribs where I'd hit the ceiling earlier. I cracked the windshield shade enough to look out. The road ahead was empty. Gravel, pines, and that mossy rodent sign half hidden in brambles. I thought about driving out right then, but I didn't want to spook whatever or whoever had been here. If they were still around, I'd rather slip away before they saw me. I killed the engine again and stretched, trying to shake off the tension. That's when I noticed it. Right up against my front bumper, no more than 3 inches, was another van. Same size as mine, white, older model. The passenger side mirror almost touched my grill. I yanked back from the shade and stared. That van hadn't been there when I pulled in. I was positive. No other vehicles for miles. I jumped out, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The air was cool and smelled of pine. I circled the 2 vans, peeking between them. The other van's windows were covered with filthy curtains, and the doors were locked. No lights on inside. No engine noise. No one in sight. My legs shook. I backed up to the driver's door of my van and let the door slam shut behind me, hoping the noise would scare whoever might be inside. Nothing. Just 2 vans parked nose to nose in a dead-end road. I fumbled for my keys and unlocked my doors. I climbed in and locked them again, then started the engine. The dashboard glowed, and my fan whirred back to life. I sat there for a long moment, gripping the wheel, staring at the other van's dark windshield. Then I flicked my headlights on high. The beams reached into the forest, but the only thing they lit was more trees. No sign of the other van moving. I tried the horn, 3 short beeps, and the echo ran down the dirt track. No reaction. My mind raced. Was this some kind of trap? Had someone followed me out here? If they were hiding behind the trees, they could jump out the moment I drove forward. I thought about curling up in the back and waiting until nightfall to slip away, but I couldn't stand being trapped. The only way out was to drive forward, straight into the front of that van. I took a deep breath, shifted into drive, and tapped the gas. The 2 vans bumped together, metal grinding gently, and my heart leaped. But the other van stayed still. My wheels lurched over the gravel as I pushed, and finally I heard the bolt-action click of its parking brake releasing. The other van rolled forward, sputtering an old diesel cough, and I let my foot off the brake just enough to keep contact. I steered gently, sliding past it by a few inches before I cleared the bumper. My headlights swung past, and I saw the driver's door open quickly. No one stepped out, but then the door shut again. I kept moving, putting distance between us, until the dead-end sign was behind me. When I hit the main road, I floored it. The trees flew by in a blur, and I didn't stop until I hit a gas station 30 miles away, under bright lights and near other cars. I killed the engine there, hands shaking so badly I could barely find the keys. I sat for a long time, listening to traffic and the humming pumps, just to remind myself I was safe. I never figured out who parked that van behind me, or why they blocked me in. Whoever it was didn't chase me down the road, just disappeared into the woods when I moved. After that, I slept only in places where someone else could see me. I never went back to that dead-end road. And I always check my mirrors, my windows, and my surroundings before I close my eyes. I pulled off the forest road just before sunset, spotting a turnout big enough for my van and my dog, Milo, to stretch out. The sky was a bruised purple, and the pines whispered above us. I killed the engine, cracked a window, and unhooked Milo's leash. He sniffed the ground, circling once, then curled up on the passenger seat. I figured we'd camp here for the night, finish the drive in the morning. I boiled water for pasta, half listening to the hiss and pop of the stove. A distant crow called, then everything went quiet, too quiet, like the whole forest paused. I peered out the windshield. No Alcard, no headlights, just mossy trunks fading into dusk. I shrugged at myself for worrying, ate my noodles, and rinsed the pot in the vented water tub I keep by the door. After I crawled into the back, Milo jumped up beside me, tail thumping once. I slid the curtain shut, leaving just enough light to see the outlines of my boots by the door. The air smelled of pine sap and cold earth. I left a vent cracked and turned on a small fan. It whirred softly, a constant reminder I wasn't anywhere fancy. I was half asleep when I heard it, a soft snap, like someone cracking their knuckles, but tense. I thought Milo might have bumped the pipe or something. Then another snap, closer. My eyes flew open. Milo's ears stood up. He crawled low in his throat, a rumble that didn't fit his usual calm. I thought maybe a branch fell or an animal passed along the roof. I lay still and listened. The fan's hum filled my head, but beneath it, I heard faint footsteps crunching on gravel. Not deer, those are softer, more erratic. These were even steps, deliberate, pacing out a short path by the driver's side. My heart beat up in my throat. Milo growled again, louder, head pressed against the curtain. I reached over and patted his side. He stayed tense, eyes fixed on the window. I didn't move to peek. Instead, I counted breaths, mine in, mine out, trying to stay calm. After 30 seconds, the crunching stopped. I waited another minute. No more snaps. No more steps. I closed my eyes, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe an early hunter checking the turnout, or a ranger on foot. But the forest noise never came back. No wind in the pines, no cricket calls, nothing. Just the fan and Milo's ragged breathing. I drifted off, half listening for sounds. In dreams, I pictured a man in camo leaning against my door. I jolted awake sometime later to a whisper of leather on metal. My heart slammed. Milo lunged forward, hackles up, snarling. I shot upright on the mattress, flashlight in hand without even thinking. I trained the beam at the side door. The curtain quivered. I could just make out a figure in full hunting gear, camouflage jacket, orange vest, face paint smudged. He stood with one hand braced on the van, the other holding a light. The beam jumped as if he shook, flickering across the curtain. My throat tightened. The man didn't move. He didn't speak. He just kept the light on the peephole right where I peeked through in case of bears. Behind the curtain, I felt Milo press against me, growling low. I flicked off my flashlight. The inside went black. My chest pounded. From outside, the light on the peephole stayed for a few seconds, then moved up to the window behind my head. A faint thump against the metal, like a fist tapping. Tap. Pause. Tap. Tap. Milo barked once, loud and full of panic. I grabbed my phone, no service, but the flashlight would work. I clicked it on, expecting to see his face through the curtain. Instead, I saw empty woods. No man. No beam. Nothing. I sank back against the mattress, breathing hard. The phone light was brighter, but the forest fell back into shadow. I whispered Milo's name. He licked my hand, panting. I stayed frozen until the phone timer in my head hit 5 minutes. Then I turned the fan off, fed Milo his water, and tiptoed to the driver's seat. I kept my phone light on my lap and looked through the windshield. No headlights, no figure, just the dead end of the turnout and the dark forest beyond. I tried the engine, nothing. Battery dead. Great. I set my jaw and opened the door, knife in hand. Milo stayed close. I stepped onto the gravel and scanned left and right. The only sound was a branch creaking overhead. I slipped around the front, using the van's body as cover, until I could see the main road. No one in sight. I jogged toward the asphalt and didn't look back until I hit the 2-lane highway. Then I moved faster, until I saw lights of a convenience store a quarter mile ahead. I didn't think the man followed. I didn't dare think about that. I slipped inside, set the knife under my jacket, and bought water and a beef stick. The clerk gave me a weird look when Milo patted beside me, but I paid and stepped back into the night with lights glaring from behind me. When I got back on the highway, I kept waving at passing cars until one slowed. A woman in a pickup asked if I was okay. I told her I was lost, my battery died. Could she give me a ride to the nearest town? She nodded, got out, and I helped lift Milo into the cab. I tossed my pack in the bed and climbed in, closing the door hard. We drove off. I kept looking out the rear window at the turnout, expecting to see a torch or a silhouette, but there was nothing. Just trees, silent and still. I slept at a motel that night, doors locked, lights on, Milo on the bed beside me. I checked the mirror over and over, waited until daylight. In the morning, we hit the road and didn't stop again until I was back home. I never went back to that forest. And every night now, when Milo's snoring next to me, I double-check my locks, my windows, and the peephole even though I moved 1,000 miles away. I parked on the edge of that rundown rest stop just after midnight. No lights except the ones on the building, and those flickered every few seconds. I killed the engine, cracked the windows just enough for air, and set my phone on the dash to charge. I wasn't tired enough to sleep right away, so I scrolled through news until my eyes stung. Then I plugged the phone in and lay back, thinking I'd drift off soon. I woke to my phone buzzing like crazy, vibrate mode going nuts. I sat up and saw a stream of airdrop requests from a device named Behind You. I stared at it for a full minute before I swiped them away. Weird, sure, but I didn't know anyone around here, so I figured someone was messing with me, trying to get a reaction. I hit decline on each one, and the buzzing finally stopped. I lay back down, but my heart was still racing. Outside, the rest stop was silent except for the hum of the vending machine through the thin van walls. I heard nothing else, no cars pulling in, no footsteps on gravel. After a while I drifted towards sleep. A few hours later, sunlight slid across my face. I woke to the smell of damp grass and that buzz in my pocket, another airdrop request. Behind you again. I yanked the phone out and shut the screen off fast. When I looked up, my windshield was hazy with dew, but someone had wiped letters across it. Look up. My throat felt dry. I leaned forward, hands on the steering wheel, and peered out. The lot was empty. No cars. No one walking by. Just the old rest stop building, 2 vending machines, a broken payphone on its side. I unlocked the doors but didn't open them. I pressed my forehead against the wheel, trying to steady my breathing. I remembered the buzzing. My phone showed no missed airdrop now, just battery charging. I tapped the screen. No notifications. Whoever tried to send me something must have done it and disconnected before it landed. I shook my head and reached for the windshield wiper switch, but paused. If I cleared the message, I might miss something. I decided to leave it. I opened the driver's door a crack, enough to peek out. The grass was wet. My tire tracks were the only ones in the gravel. I scanned left and right. Everything looked normal. The highway on-ramp hummed faintly a quarter-mile away. But no one was out here. Back inside, I sat up straight and tried to recall any odd sounds before the phone buzz. I remembered tapping, like someone rapping on the metal roof. Not loud, just a soft stutter that woke me the first time. Then, when I thought it was an animal, I heard it again closer to the sliding door. I froze and didn't move until I fell back asleep. Now I realized I'd never really checked. I slipped out, flashlight in hand, and walked around the van. Nothing. No footprints in the grass. It was muddy, so prints would have shown. No empty beer cans, no cigarette butts. No sign anyone had been here. When I got back in, my phone buzzed a third time. I snapped upright before it even lit up. Another airdrop from behind you, and a tiny preview showed it was a single image. I tapped accept by mistake, my hands were shaking, and quickly hit cancel when I saw it. No photo appeared. The screen just blinked and the notification vanished. My pulse jumped. I swore under my breath and checked the clock. 6:17 a.m. too early for people around here, but sunrise was still half an hour off. I sat back, debating what to do. I glanced at that message on the do again. Look up. It felt like a dare. I turned my head slowly toward the back of the van. Through the small awning window I could see nothing but thick pines. I felt silly, almost. Who cared who was behind me? I reached over and pressed the vent fan off so I could listen better. I closed my eyes and held still. No wind in the trees. No birds. Just a soft click like a camera shutter, so faint I almost missed it. I snapped my head back to the window and shined the flashlight beam straight up. The roof of the van was a few feet above me. I poked my head out the window and looked up between the branches. The sky was slate gray, but I saw something pale against it, balanced on the corner of the van's roof. I climbed out fast, feet slipping in the grass, and ran to the front. My flashlight caught the edge of someone's pale cheek. They were lying flat on top of the van, chest down, arms hugging the gutter. A dark hoodie covered their head, and I thought I saw a phone in their hand, aiming at me. I skidded to a stop, heart pounding, and they rolled off like a spooked cat, landing on their feet behind me in a crouch. We stared at each other. The van blocked them from nearly any angle a camera would see. They wore gloves, and I saw the camera shutter of a phone. They took a half step closer, and I realized they were young, mid-20s, skinny, that dead-eye look of someone who'd practiced this. "Stop," I said, but my voice cracked. "What do you want?" They stood up straight and looked at me. No smile, just that hoodie pulled low. Then they reached into their pocket and pulled out my license plate, the metal plate with my registration that should have been on the bumper. They held it up, read it, then tossed it to the ground. I felt a cold wave down my spine. "Give it back," I said, but they just shook their head and pocketed it. Birds started singing as the sun crested the pines. The early morning light lit the clearing. The kid took a step back, hands in pockets again. My head felt fuzzy. I tried to think. I remembered the keys in my pocket. I fumbled the knife from the dash and flicked it open. Without thinking, I lunged forward one swing, but I missed. The blade grazed the sleeve of the hoodie. They yanked back, startled, and I grabbed my license plate off the ground. They watched me, silent. I backed up toward the road, holding the plate like a shield. The kid didn't move. The morning traffic on the highway was starting, occasional cars passing a quarter-mile off. I had a split second to act. I dashed for the driver's door, unlocked it, and slid in. I slammed it shut, locked it, and revved the engine. The kid pounded on the side window once, flat hand, no nails, then turned and vanished into the trees. I floored it onto the highway. My tires sprayed gravel as I merged onto asphalt. I didn't look back. When I hit the next town, I pulled into a gas station under bright neon. I called the police, gave them the license plate number and location, and told them about the whole thing. The dispatcher told me someone would check, but they needed me to get somewhere safe. I sat inside the station until I saw a patrol car roll up, then I climbed in and told them everything. They drove me back to the rest stop, 2 officers with flashlights tapping around, finding no one. No prints, no hoodie. They said someone had been watching me for a while, knew where I'd sleep, and tried to freak me out with the phone and the camera trick. They called it stalking, and I called it the scariest thing I'd ever felt, having someone outside my van in the dark, sending a message through dew and phone buzz, and then appearing overhead without a sound. I didn't wait for them to clear the scene. I got a ride to the nearest motel, doors locked, lights on, TV blaring. I held my license plate in my lap and didn't let go until morning, when I swapped it out and got on the road again. I'd been driving all day and pulled off onto the farmer's field just as the sun dipped behind the trees. There was no sign but tire ruts leading to a wide patch of dirt beside a tall corn line. I figured I'd rest there, no cops, no highway noise, just crickets and the wind through the stalks. I killed the engine, stepped out, and took a deep breath of sweet earth. Milo, my lab mix, circled once and plopped down on the dirt next to the van. I set up the back seat as a bed, blanket, pillow, Milo's old chew toy. My phone had 1 bar and no data, but I didn't care. I'd slept in worse spots. I boiled water on my little stove, ate pad thai right out of the bag, and rinsed the pot in a collapsible bucket. The last glow of daylight lit the corn ahead in gold, and I thought it looked peaceful. I climbed into the back, closed the curtain, and flipped the fan on low. Milo curled up by my feet. Somewhere after midnight I woke to a dragging sound. Soft, deliberate, like a stick scraping metal. I lay still and listened. It moved from front to back, slow and steady. My heart picked up. I rolled onto my elbow and peeked through the tiny gap at the bottom of the curtain. A long, thin branch scraped along the driver's side, leaving faint scratches in the paint. I held my breath, and the sound stopped. Milo's ears were up. He didn't bark, just watched the window. I didn't dare move. After maybe 10 minutes, when I thought I'd lose my mind lying there, the tapping started on the passenger side. Tap, pause, tap tap, like someone testing the door handle or a window frame. I wanted to shout, but my throat felt raw. I strained to hear anything else, footsteps, voices, but there was only the distant hoot of an owl and that tapping. I waited it out until the tapping faded, then sat up and rubbed my eyes. My ribs ached from staying still. I grabbed my phone, still 1 bar, and flicked on the flashlight. The light hit the curtain, making a sliver of brightness. I eased up, flashing it over the body of the van. No shadow, no one crouched. Just the corn, still and dark. My legs felt like jelly. I thought about calling the cops, but figured no signal would kill that. So I tiptoed to the front seat, flashlight tucked under my chin, and peeked through the windshield. The lot was empty except for my tracks and a thin moonlight stripe along the corn's edge. Nothing moved. I closed the curtain and leaned back, heart still racing. What if someone was hiding in the corn? Watching me all day, waiting until I fell asleep? I rubbed Milo's head. He whimpered softly but stayed by my side. I tucked the phone under my pillow and tried to sleep facing the back door, but the quiet felt too loud. Every little noise, a twig snapping, the fan clicking, echoed inside my skull. I must have nodded off because I jerked awake to a rustle and a soft groan against the side of the van. The fan was off. I reached over and shut it down without realizing. The sound was just outside the sliding door. My pulse thundered. I flipped the phone light back on, heart in my throat, and flung the curtain aside. No stick this time, just a shadow of cornstalks outlined by moonlight, inches from the glass. I leaned out, trying to see between rows. The rustle came again, farther down, like someone stepping on dry leaves. I snapped the curtain shut and sat in darkness. Milo crawled low. I pressed my hand to the wall, feeling the fan tremble from his barking. He was right, something was out there. Time dragged. I watched the clock on my dash, 2:43 a.m. I debated leaving the engine running for the noise, but I knew a running van would draw a flashlight or a shout. I stayed quiet, counting breaths, willing the corn to stay still. At 4:07 a.m., a whisper, hissed, barely louder than my own breath. I froze. Someone stood at the passenger window, low enough I didn't see more than the tip of a hunting cap. Then the whisper again, "Let me in." I grabbed my pocket knife, thumb on the flipper, and shoved against the door. "Go away," I hissed, voice shaky. No answer. A finger tapped on the glass, light, precise. Tap, tap, tap. Like Morse code. Milo snarled and knocked into the wall. The van rocked. I could smell someone's breath on the glass, sour, cold. I slammed my hand on the door unlock, but it stayed locked. I tried the handle, nothing moved. "I'm calling the cops," I said, though I knew there was no signal. The tapping stopped. The rustle of corn went silent. For minutes, nothing. Then footsteps, heavy and slow, receded into the darkness. The tapping returned at the front of it, click, click, slow. I sat, knife in hand, until the first pale light of dawn touched the corn. Milo whimpered and licked my wrist. I pressed my face to the curtain slit and peered out. No one. No tracks other than mine. The van's hood was clear, no stick. My skin prickled. I got out as quietly as I could, leaving the sliding door closed, and walked to the back. The corn was still. The ground was firm, no footprints. I shined the light in straight rows, nothing. I circled the van, checking all sides. The grass was flattened where I'd walked. No signs of someone hiding. No fresh sticks. Just my van alone in the big field. I checked the lock again, solid. I slid back inside, heart still hammering. I started the engine, but it sputtered. I turned the key again, nothing. Battery dead. The radio blinked, then went dark. My jaw clenched. I was stuck. Milo whimpered. I grabbed my keys and knife, squeezed into my boots, and let him out the side door. I closed it behind me and snapped the keys in my pocket. I guided him toward the gravel road. The field was silent. The woods beyond were silent. I stuck to the edge of the corn, away from the stalks, shining the phone light ahead. After maybe 100 yards, I saw tire tracks in the gravel, 2 sets, old, fading toward the highway. I followed them out of the field, stepping on loose stones, careful not to stumble. The distant hum of a car engine reached me as I crossed the asphalt. I walked to the highway and managed to flag down a pickup a few minutes later. The driver, a guy in a high-vis vest, nodded when I told him about the van. He gave me a ride back, us pulling into the field with headlights blazing. We found the van, jumped the battery, and I got back in to start it. It coughed to life. I thanked him and drove away, the headlights cutting through the corn line until it vanished behind me. I passed the turnout at 20 miles an hour, tuned to the humming road. Milo curled up in the passenger seat, tail thumping once, safe at last. I pulled off the 2-lane road just past sunset, squeezing the van into a patch of gravel behind a row of closed storefronts. The street lights were half dead, and the windows of the shops were dark. I killed the engine, cracked a window for air, and set my phone on the dash to charge. No bars, but at least I'd know what time it was. I'd read about this spot online. Quiet, no patrols after 10. Perfect for stealth camping. I stretched out on the bench seat, feet propped by the sliding door, and dropped into the half-awake, half-dream state. Somewhere behind me, a dog barked once, then nothing for a long time. My phone clock glowed 10:17 p.m. At 10:32 p.m., I woke to a faint beep, like an old alarm clock in the back of my head. I sat up and listened. Nothing, no cars, no footsteps. I rubbed my eyes and lay back down. 10 minutes later, at exactly 10:47, the beep came again. Short, electronic, and distant, but coming from outside. I zipped the curtain aside an inch and peered out. Gravel lot empty except my tired van. No glowing lights, no shadows moving. I shut the curtain and lay awake, waiting for the next one. At 11:02 it beeped again. I shoved my phone in my pocket and opened the sliding door a crack. The air was cool, smelled of dry asphalt and wet grass beyond the pavement. I scanned the lot with my eyes, but everything stayed still. The beeps were so soft I was never sure exactly where they came from. I closed the door and sat on the seat edge, my heart pounding. Maybe the van's battery indicator? No, that only gave me a single tone when power was low. I checked the fuses earlier. Nothing made sense. At 11:17 I heard a car engine idling down the street. The lights spilled over the storefronts, but whoever it was stayed on the main road. I didn't see the car. It didn't turn into the lot. It just passed, engine droning away into the distance. Beep at 11:32. I counted them out on my fingers. 7 so far. I was too tired to stay mad. I yawned, clicked off the dome light, and tried to sleep. Sometime after midnight, I woke to rustling, the refrigerator cycling in the van, I thought. Except I hadn't plugged it in, no power. I glanced at my phone, 12:02 a.m. I lay still. The rustle turned into a barely audible shuffling, like someone stepping on the gravel right at the edge of the streetlight's cone. Then the crackle of broken glass underfoot. I held still until it faded. At 12:17 the beep came again. My head snapped up. The sound felt close, like it was strapped to the underside of the van. I pressed my ear to the floorboard. Nothing but the steady hum of the charging phone. Morning light began to stain the curtains pale gray. Somewhere around 5:47 a.m. the final beep beep. That one echoed for a full second, louder than the rest. I threw back the curtains and jumped out onto my elbows. The lot was empty. No cars. No people. I stood up and peered under the van with my flashlight. My heart thudded when I saw a small black box stuck to the rear axle with two round magnets. About the size of a pack of gum, with a little LED flickering red every time it beeped. I crouched and shone the light on it. A thin wire curled around the axle. No labels, no brand, no obvious way to pry it off. The magnets were strong. I tried to tug it free with gloved fingers, but it only slipped slightly before snapping back in place. I felt trapped, like someone had been at my back door at 2 a.m., attaching this thing while I slept. I imagined a guy crouching in the weeds, face half hidden, listening for the next beep to confirm it was working. I went around front to stretch my legs, flashlight scanning the storefront windows, shattered one pane, but that crack was old. No sign of fresh footprints. The gravel was too packed to show tracks. I felt cold sweat on my neck. I snapped the knife open and, with the edge, scraped at the box's seam until the case popped apart. Inside, a tiny circuit board and a battery, and a little buzzer under the board. I yanked out the buzzer and flicked the battery out, then clipped the wire. A small puff of dust rose from the magnets, and the LED went dark. I snapped the case back together poorly and stuffed the whole thing in my jacket pocket. I knew better than to leave evidence lying around. I hoped whoever planted it would never spot it missing. My hands shook when I climbed into the driver's seat. I stared at the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights staring back. Nothing. I started the engine, lights off, and eased onto the pavement. My pulse was still high as I rolled past the storefronts. When I hit the main road, I checked my phone and messages from friends wondering where I was. I hit send on a quick text, pretending I'd slept in. Then I conned it. I didn't take the nearest exit. I kept driving until I reached a well-lit gas station with a 7 a.m. crowd, clerks and customers moving around. Under those fluorescent bulbs it felt safe. I wiped the box off on my jeans and tossed it in the trash by the pumps. The rest of the drive was all highway. I kept my eyes on the mirrors, saw nothing following. When I got home a few hours later, I parked in my driveway, locked all the doors, and checked under the axles again. No box, no magnets, nothing. I figured someone wanted to track me, a creep with a GPS logger, but the only record I had was that little black thing in a garbage bin, dead as the lot behind that quiet town. It was around midnight, maybe a little later. I was driving back from a weekend at my cousin's place in Vermont. Long drive. I'd been on the road for about 4 hours already, and there was still another hour or so to go. The highway was empty, just long stretches of trees and dark fields. My phone was charging on the dash, and the only sound in the car was the low hum of a podcast I wasn't even really listening to anymore. The first time the I-beams flashed behind me, I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe someone was trying to pass and I hadn't noticed. But when I glanced in the mirror, the car wasn't close enough for that. It was maybe 6 or 7 car lengths behind. Too far back to be asking me to move over. They turned the high beams off again after a second, so I just kept driving. But then it happened again. A few minutes later. Flash, quick, then off. I checked my lights, thinking maybe I had a tail light out or something. Everything looked normal from what I could tell. The car behind me was still hanging back, not tailgating or anything. Just there. Same distance. Not trying to pass. Over the next 20 miles or so, they kept flashing. Not constantly, but enough to make me feel weird. 5 times, maybe 6. No honking, no speeding up. Just random flashes. I tried to ignore it, but it got in my head. I turned off the podcast and rolled the window down a bit to keep myself alert. The air was cold and sharp. I remember thinking it smelled a little like wood leaves and gas, which didn't make sense out in the middle of nowhere. Eventually, I pulled into this old rest area. One of those tiny ones with a single vending machine and a flickering light over the bathrooms. I thought maybe if I stopped for a minute, they'd just keep driving and I could get rid of them. I parked by the machine, got out, stretched my legs. The car pulled in behind me. It parked 2 spots over. I froze for a second, then acted like I hadn't noticed. I walked to the vending machine, grabbed a bottle of water, and tried to stay casual. My hands were shaking a little. The guy in the other car didn't get out. I could see him in the driver's seat, head down like he was messing with his phone or something. After a couple minutes, I got back in my car. I sat there with the engine running, watching my mirrors. Nothing. Just him sitting there. I put the car in drive and slowly pulled out. He didn't move. I waited until I was back on the highway before checking the mirror again. He was behind me. Same distance. Same flashing. That's when I really started getting scared. My chest felt tight, like it was harder to breathe. I kept checking my rear view every few seconds. He was still back there, keeping perfect pace. Whenever I sped up, he did too. Not tailgating, just keeping up. Another 20 minutes went by like that. Then he flashed again, 3 quick bursts this time. I pulled over. I didn't even think about it, I just jerked the wheel onto the shoulder and hit the brakes hard. Gravel kicked up under the tires. The car behind me slowed and pulled up beside me, stopping just a little ahead. I cracked my window, not all the way, just a couple inches. My heart was pounding. The guy got out and walked over. He looked mid-40s, maybe older. Heavy jacket, ball cap, kind of rough looking but not sketchy. He didn't come right up to my window, he stopped a few feet away with his hands up, like he was trying to show me he wasn't a threat. Then he said, "I'm sorry if I scared you, but someone just crawled out of your trunk." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him. He looked serious. Not panicked, not dramatic. Just very direct. I saw the trunk bounce about 10 minutes ago. A few minutes later, I saw a hand reach up and close it. Then nothing. But just now, it opened again, someone rolled out and ran into the woods. I was frozen. I didn't know what to say. He kept talking, quiet and calm. I thought maybe you knew them at first, but then they ducked and ran when the lights hit. I figured you had no idea. That's why I flashed. I opened the door and stepped out slowly. My legs felt weird, like I'd been sitting too long, but I hadn't. We walked to the back of my car together. The trunk was closed. I unlocked it and lifted it open. Empty. Totally empty. No sign of anything weird, nothing disturbed. Just the spare tire and the little roadside kit I keep back there. The guy scratched the back of his neck. They must have jumped when we hit that last bend. There was a spot where the trees came up real close. He offered to call the cops, but I told him I would. I didn't want to follow him or have him follow me. Even if he was telling the truth, which, honestly, I believed him, I still didn't want to be around anyone right then. He nodded, got in his car, and pulled off down the road. I sat there for a bit, watching the woods. Didn't see anything. When I finally got home, after checking the back seat a dozen times along the way, I took the car into a garage the next morning. I asked them to check the trunk lock, see if anything was off. They said everything looked fine. Nothing forced, nothing broken. But the weird thing was, there were smudges on the inside of the trunk lid. Like someone had touched it with dirty fingers. For smears, like fingertips. Right near the emergency release handle. My back tire blew out around 11:40 p.m., maybe closer to midnight. I was about 20 miles outside of town, middle of nowhere. I'd taken the long way home after visiting my sister, just felt like driving and clearing my head. The road was a 2-lane stretch, not much traffic even during the day, and at night it was dead quiet. I passed maybe 2 cars in the last half hour before it happened. It wasn't loud, just a pop, and then the car started pulling hard to the right. I managed to get it onto the shoulder without freaking out. I sat there for a second, hazard lights ticking. There was no shoulder light, no signs, just me and the dead dark trees past the ditch. I got out and checked. The back passenger tire was shredded. I had a donut in the trunk, but I hadn't changed a tire in years. Still, I figured I'd try. I got everything out, and I was crouched next to the wheel with the jack when I heard a car slow down behind me. The tires crackled on the gravel, and headlights spilled over my legs. I stood up fast and turned. It was a dark SUV. I couldn't make out the driver at first because the lights were in my face. Then they switched off, and the guy rolled down his window a few inches. "You all right?" he called out. I nodded, but I stepped back a little. "Yeah, just changing the tire." "You need help?" "I'm good, thanks." He didn't drive away. He just stayed there, engine running. I noticed his window was only cracked open, like 2 fingers width. "You sure?" he said again. Not a great spot to be stuck. "I appreciate it, but I'm okay." He didn't answer. Just sat there. I waited, trying not to look like I was watching him too hard. After a few seconds, he rolled up the window and pulled forward slowly. He didn't speed off, just crept ahead and then parked maybe 30 yards up the road, on the opposite shoulder. His taillights stayed on. I stood there holding the jack, watching those red lights. I thought maybe he was waiting for something. Maybe making a call, or just pulling over to get out and walk back to help. But the doors never opened. After maybe 5 minutes, I tried to shake it off. I got down and started working on the lug nuts, glancing up every so often. His car never moved. At one point the brake lights flared like he tapped them, then dimmed again. I started sweating, even though it was probably 50 degrees out. My hands weren't working right, and I kept fumbling the wrench. The guy's SUV just sat there. Then I heard a car door shut. I froze. Looked up. His SUV was still shut up tight. I stood slowly and scanned around. No one. just trees and road. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, or maybe a door slam echoed from further away. But there were no other cars. No houses. Nothing. I packed up the tools. Decided to drive on the flat if I had to. As I shoved the jack back in the trunk, I heard gravel crunching, like footsteps. I slammed the trunk and turned toward the sound. Nothing. I was done playing around. I got in the car, started it, and pulled back onto the road. I passed his SUV, and I glanced over. I could barely see him, his head turned slightly, like he was watching me. He didn't move. I drove about 5 miles on the flat until I hit a wide turnout. I pulled over, left the car running, and called roadside assistance. They said a tow would be out in about 45 minutes. I sat there, scanning my mirrors, doors locked. Every car that passed made me flinch. About 20 minutes later, headlights showed up in my rearview mirror. It was the same SUV. I knew because of the shape of the headlights, one of them had a faint flicker, like it wasn't fully secure. I slid down in my seat a little. He didn't stop behind me. He slowed, then pulled off the road about 30 feet ahead this time. Same as before, he just sat there, taillights glowing. No one got out. I called 911, told them what was happening, gave them my location. They said a deputy was en route and to stay in the car. I kept the line open until I saw another set of headlights coming up behind. The SUV pulled away before the deputy even got close. Didn't speed, didn't swerve. Just pulled back onto the road and vanished into the dark. The deputy was nice enough. He stood by until the tow guy came. I didn't tell him everything, just said the guy had stopped, made me uncomfortable, then followed me. He offered to take a report, but I said I just wanted to go home. They loaded up the car, and I rode with the tow guy. He didn't talk much, and that was fine by me. I thought that was the end of it. But 3 days later, I found something in my mailbox. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper. It said, "Next time, just get in the car." I was driving back home from a weekend trip and had stopped at a rest stop to stretch my legs. It was around midnight, and the place was practically empty. One of those quiet rest areas where you're just trying to get in and out without seeing anyone. It was dark, but there were a few lights from the bathrooms and the parking lot. I went into the restroom, and it was one of those awkwardly quiet ones. No music, no sounds, just the hum of the lights above me and the sound of my own footsteps echoing off the tile. I didn't take long, just washed my hands and checked my reflection in the mirror. You know, the usual. I was ready to get back on the road, so I walked out of the bathroom and made my way to the car. It was parked not far from the entrance, about halfway down the lot. I remember thinking how empty it was, how quiet everything felt. I was the only one at the far end, with just a couple of trucks parked at the other end. I didn't think anything of it. When I got to where I thought I'd parked, I froze. My car wasn't there. I stood there for a second, staring at the empty space. Maybe I was tired or just not thinking straight, but I figured I must have parked somewhere else, so I walked up and down the rows, scanning every spot. It wasn't like I was looking for a particular car. I knew it was mine because of the rust spot on the front bumper. But it wasn't there. I checked the lot again. No car. It was getting colder, and I could feel myself starting to panic, but I tried to stay calm. I had just seen the car. I was certain it was parked there. I started pacing around, trying to wrap my mind around it. Maybe I was going crazy. Maybe I left the keys on top of the car, and someone had taken it. Maybe it was just a weird mistake, but that didn't make sense. I checked my pockets, even though I knew I hadn't taken anything out, but nothing. No keys, no wallet, no phone. I could feel my stomach drop. The dread started to set in. I went back to the bathroom, hoping maybe I dropped something, but it was empty now. I was starting to freak out at this point. There were no other cars around, and the trucks parked in the lot weren't moving. I went to the vending machines to try and get some kind of help, but there was nobody inside the small area. I pressed the button to call for help at the rest stop, but it just buzzed a few times before cutting off. Then I heard something. It was faint at first, just the sound of footsteps. I turned quickly, half expecting to see a fellow traveler or someone else who was stuck there, but no one was around. The footsteps weren't loud or close, but they were coming from somewhere behind the building. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't know what to do. I had no phone, no way to call anyone. The only thing I could think was to walk toward the parking lot's entrance and see if there was anyone around. As I made my way out, I noticed a man standing by one of the truck cabs. He didn't look out of place, but something about his stance made me uneasy. He was just standing there, staring at the lot, not moving, not doing anything. I took a few steps closer, but when I did, he turned and started walking toward the far side of the lot, away from the road. I thought about going back to the bathroom and just sitting there, waiting for the panic to pass, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The man's gaze had lingered on me for too long, and I couldn't figure out why he was there. Why had he been standing so still? I made my way to the exit of the rest stop, looking around constantly. The darkness outside felt suffocating, and I could hear the wind picking up. There was no one else around. The only car was mine, and it wasn't where I left it. I stepped into the parking lot again, my eyes scanning the area for my car, my phone, anything that could give me some sense of control. The closer I got to the lot's entrance, the more I realized how completely alone I was. The trucks weren't moving, no one was passing by, and the lights seemed dimmer than before. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a door opening, just behind me. My heart dropped. I turned quickly, expecting the man I had seen earlier to be there, but no one was standing in the lot. The door had opened from one of the trucks. I didn't know why it felt so ominous, but it did. Something was wrong. My chest felt tight, and I started to walk faster, hoping I could make it to the main road where I could find some sign of life. But before I could take another step, I heard the sound of tires on gravel, soft at first, then louder as if a car was pulling in. I didn't even have to look to know that it was mine. There was no other car around, and the sound was coming from the direction where I'd last seen my car. I turned to look. A sedan had pulled up to the edge of the lot, close to where my car had been. There was no one in the driver's seat, and the car's lights were off. But the windows were rolled down. I couldn't move. The sight of that empty car, parked exactly where my car should have been, made everything inside of me freeze. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually, a figure stepped out from behind the car. It was a man. He didn't say anything. He just walked toward me, his steps measured and slow. I could see his face now, lit by the dim light coming from the restroom. His eyes were locked on me. I didn't know what to do. My legs were heavy, like they were cemented to the ground. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low but not particularly menacing. I didn't answer at first. What could I say? I was terrified, and I had no idea where my car or my stuff was. Everything felt wrong. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" he asked again, stepping closer, but still not in a way that felt threatening. I didn't even respond. I just backed up a few steps, trying to figure out what to do. Finally, I turned and ran for the exit, not looking back once. I didn't stop until I hit the first main road, where I flagged down a passing car. I don't know who that man was or where he came from, but I never went back to that rest stop again. I don't know what happened to my car. I don't know what happened to my phone or my wallet. But I know I'll never forget the sound of that door opening and the way he just stood there, waiting. I started running at 11:06. I remember that because I glanced at my watch before I left the house. It had been raining earlier, but the clouds cleared up and left everything damp and shining under the streetlights. I like running that late, less traffic, less noise, just the sound of my shoes and the occasional drip from the trees. There's a loop I do through the neighborhood and out past the golf course, maybe 3 miles total. I don't usually see anyone. Sometimes a dog barking behind a fence, maybe someone's porch light turning on. That night felt normal. A little cooler than usual, but not cold. My breath fogged a little when I exhaled. The first weird thing happened about halfway through. I was coming up the backside of the loop, right where the sidewalk cuts between the chain link fence and that long stretch of hedges behind the condos. No houses face that section, and there aren't any streetlights, just this one motion sensor lamp above a utility box, and even that flickers sometimes. I was in the middle of checking my pace when I looked down and saw the time jump. 1 second it said 11:29, and the next it jumped to 12:22. No notifications, no buzz on my wrist, just a blink and it was almost an hour later. I stopped running immediately, pulled the watch closer to my face, tapped the screen a couple times, but everything else looked normal. Battery was fine. No new messages or missed calls. It had recorded the run up to that point, heart rate, distance, elevation, but then there was this long, flat gap. No data between 11:30 and 12:20. I checked my phone just to make sure it wasn't the watch acting up. It said 12:23. I turned around, looked back down the sidewalk. It was empty. No cars, no people, no movement at all. Just this long, damp stretch of pavement lined with hedges and chain link. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I thought maybe I'd zoned out. That happens sometimes, especially on familiar routes. But not for 50 minutes. And not without noticing. I started walking back the way I came. Not running. Just walking. My legs didn't feel tired, but something in my chest felt off, tight and sort of floaty. Then I saw the footprints. They weren't there before. I know that sounds weird to say, but I'd just come down that exact sidewalk not 10 minutes earlier. There were no footprints then. Now, there was a set of them, pale, bare footprints in the damp concrete. No shoes. No tread marks. Just 2 feet, side by side, pointed toward the street. The sidewalk wasn't wet enough to hold a print unless something had stepped in actual water before walking across it. These prints looked fresh, like they'd just been made. They were long and narrow, with almost no arch. I looked around again. Nothing. No cars. No open gates. No rustling in the hedges. I walked closer to the prints and noticed something else. There was no stride. Just those 2 feet, flat and still, like someone had stood there and vanished. No steps leading to or away. I took a step back and just stood there for a while. My watch ticked over to 12:28. I could hear my own breathing. I don't know what made me do it, but I looked up. Not just glanced, but actually tilted my head back and stared straight up at the sky. There weren't any stars. No clouds either. Just a solid black sky, like someone had cut out a sheet of paper and taped it over everything. It wasn't just dark, it looked flat. And in that moment, I had this sensation I can't really explain. Like I wasn't supposed to be looking. Like something above me had just looked away, and I'd barely missed it. I started walking again. Not running. I didn't want to make noise. I cut through the next block instead of finishing the loop. I just wanted to be somewhere with lights and houses. Something about that stretch of sidewalk suddenly felt wrong, like if I turned around again, there'd be more footprints behind me. When I reached the corner near the elementary school, I saw a shape down by the swings. Just standing there. Too far to make out details, but it wasn't moving. The playground was lit by two old floodlights mounted on a pole. One of them was flickering, casting this slow pulse across the monkey bars and sandpit. The figure was just inside the edge of the light. It didn't move, didn't sway. Just stood there, facing the fence. I didn't stop walking, but I slowed down. Something about the way it stood didn't look right. Arms too close to the body, head tilted slightly, like it was listening. I crossed the street and stayed on the opposite sidewalk. I didn't want to take my eyes off it, but I didn't want to stare either. When I passed the school and looked back, it was gone. I didn't hear it leave. No sound at all. I got home at 12:49. My front door was locked. Nothing was out of place. I went inside, turned on every light, and just stood in the kitchen for a while. I checked the watch again. The run had stopped recording at 12:23. It logged 2.9 miles and then cut off. I uploaded the data to my phone. The route was there up until the time jump. Then a blank line. No GPS signal drop, no heart rate, no elevation change. Just a flat void. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I went back out around 7 o'clock just to see if the prints were still there. They weren't. But there was a faint, curved smear where they'd been. Not footprints, exactly, more like the residue you get after wiping something away with a wet rag. The shape was right, though. That same curve at the edge of the heel. I haven't run that loop since. I still go out, just not past the golf course, and not after midnight. I keep the watch, but I stopped wearing it at night. Every once in a while, I'll glance at it and see the time blink forward a few seconds. Not often. Maybe once a month. The last time it happened, I was in my driveway. Just getting back from work, reaching for the door. Time blinked. 6:41 to 6:42. When I looked up, there was a damp footprint on the concrete behind my car. Bare. Pale. And the sky was perfectly clear. I was out for my usual morning jog, the kind I do almost every day before work. That morning was different though. Thick fog had rolled in overnight, so everything was muted, like the world had been wrapped in a gray blanket. The streets were empty except for me, and the usual noises of the neighborhood felt softened, almost swallowed up by the mist. I was about halfway through my route when I came up on the old stone bridge near the river. It's not a big bridge or anything, just a couple lanes over a small creek, but it always felt a little eerie, especially in the fog. The stone is covered with moss, and the creek water runs dark and slow beneath it. I'd passed under that bridge hundreds of times before, never thinking much about it. That morning, as I got closer, I started feeling this weird pressure in my ears. like when you're on a plane going through turbulence and your ears pop. But I was standing still, and it wasn't the usual pinch or discomfort. It was stronger, more intense, and it didn't go away. It was almost like my head was underwater, or like someone was slowly tightening a clamp around my skull. I stopped right under the bridge, trying to shake it off, hoping it was just some weird sinus thing from the cold air. I put my hands over my ears and breathed through my mouth, but it didn't help. The pressure just stayed there, low but persistent, and it started to make me dizzy. I glanced around, expecting maybe some loud noise or construction or something, but the fog was thick and the street was completely silent. No cars, no people, no birds, just this dull, heavy quiet. Then I noticed the ground right next to the sidewalk, under the bridge. There was this patch of frost, perfectly circular, maybe a little bigger than a dinner plate. I'm pretty familiar with the area, and I knew for a fact it hadn't been there when I ran past that spot earlier that morning. The air was cold, but not freezing, and the rest of the ground was just damp, no frost anywhere else. This patch looked fresh, like it had just appeared. I stared at it, confused. It was like a perfect white ring on the dark asphalt. No footprints leading to it, no tire marks, nothing. Just this weird, cold circle sitting there alone. I looked back up at the bridge and felt the pressure in my ears spike again. I wanted to move, but my legs felt heavy, almost numb. The fog seemed to close in around me, and the silence grew thicker. I checked my phone to see what time it was. 6:18 a.m. No messages, no missed calls. But the screen flickered for a second, like the brightness was adjusting on its own. Then it went back to normal. I thought maybe I was just imagining things or getting overheated from the jog, so I shook my head and started walking again. The pressure in my ears stayed, though it eased off a bit as I got away from the bridge. About 100 feet down the road, I heard something, a soft tapping sound, like someone drumming their fingers on metal. I stopped and looked around, but the fog swallowed everything. No cars, no people. I called out hello, but my voice sounded muffled, like it was coming from far away. The tapping stopped instantly. I told myself it was probably a branch hitting a street sign or something small like that, and kept moving. Still, the feeling of being watched settled in behind me. I checked over my shoulder a few times, but the fog made it impossible to see much. When I reached the park at the end of my run, things got even stranger. I pulled out my water bottle from my bag and the cap wouldn't budge. I twisted and twisted, but it felt like it was sealed shut tight, almost glued. After a minute of struggling, it popped open, and a sudden cold rush of air came out, like the bottle had somehow been chilled all night, even though I had left it inside my warm apartment. I shrugged it off, trying to focus on finishing my jog. But my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. The message was blank. I checked the screen carefully. No characters, no spaces, nothing. Just a completely empty message. I deleted it, thinking maybe it was a glitch, but then my phone screen flashed black for a second. When it came back on, my battery was suddenly at 20%, even though I had charged it fully the night before. I decided to head home. On the way back, the pressure in my ears came back again, but stronger. It was like being underwater, but also like a really loud noise was trying to push through my skull. I put my hands over my ears and slowed down, but it didn't get better. I passed the bridge again, this time from the other side. The frost patch was gone. I stopped and looked around. The fog felt thinner now, the sun starting to rise and burn it off. But there was something else. On the opposite side of the street, near a clump of trees, I thought I saw a shape, tall, thin, standing perfectly still. It wasn't a person, not really. Too tall, too still. I blinked, and it was gone. I got home and locked the door behind me. I spent the day feeling off, like my head was full of static. My ears kept popping on and off, and every so often I'd catch a glimpse of that circular frost patch in the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. I checked my phone again before bed. No messages, no glitches. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there that morning, watching, waiting under that bridge. And I keep wondering what that frost patch was, how it appeared and disappeared without a trace, and why my ears felt like they were about to burst for no reason at all. I haven't gone jogging under that bridge since.